You'd think Chernobyl would be a dead zone, but a lot of life is thriving and changing in surprising ways. Frogs are changing color, dogs are building radiation resistance, and catfish are turning into underwater tanks. These are terrifying Chernobyl mutations caught on camera. What you're looking at here is a frog affected by the radiation of Chernobyl. In 2016, two Spanish researchers, Pablo Barraco and German Oriazola, were studying how life was bouncing back in Pripyat, and they noticed something strange: black frogs. Now, obviously, dark-colored frogs on their own aren't unusual, but the type of frog they were looking at, Hyla orientalis, a tree frog native to the area, is usually bright green. So what happened? Well, it turns out it might be evolution caused by the radiation. The darker skin isn't random. These frogs have developed higher levels of melanin, the same pigment that protects human skin from UV damage. In this case, it helps block radiation from damaging the frog's cells. And it seems this shift happened fast. Within a few decades, a bright green species started turning dark to survive in a nuclear zone. It's one of the clearest examples of nature adapting. Instead of dying out, these frogs have adjusted their biology to deal with one of the harshest environments on the planet. This is Jeremy Wade, River Monsters guy, pulling a massive catfish out of one of the cooling ponds near the Chernobyl power plant. These ponds are still radioactive. Wade mentioned the fish he caught had radiation levels about 16 times higher than normal. But what really grabs attention is the size of these things. They're huge. People have wondered if radiation is causing these fish to mutate and grow into monsters, but it may not be the radiation that's making them giants. It's more about the environment. These ponds are closed off, meaning the catfish are at the top of the food chain. No predators, tons of food, and people even feed them sometimes, so over time they just get bigger and bigger. They're living longer as well, which adds to their size. Now, that doesn't mean they're not being affected by the radiation. They're definitely soaking it in, and scientists are still studying whether there are long-term mutations or effects we can't see from the outside. Either way though, these catfish are a real reminder of how life can keep going in places where it really shouldn't. In the Chernobyl exclusion zone are basically radiation sponges. Out of the animals still hanging around, these guys are carrying some of the highest levels of radioactive material in their bodies, and it all comes down to what they eat. Boars dig through the soil looking for roots, insects, and mushrooms, especially deer truffles. And those truffles are loaded with radiation because the soil around Chernobyl is still contaminated. So the boars eat, and the radiation builds up inside them. Over time, it's had some nasty effects. People have reported sightings of boars with strange growths, tumors, physical deformities. It's not like they're growing extra legs or anything out of a comic book, but their bodies clearly aren't doing great. Radiation messes with their cells and weakens their immune systems, making them more likely to get sick or develop weird internal issues. But even still, they are surviving. Maybe not as well as the dogs or wolves, but they've managed to reproduce and live in this environment. Some are even leaving the exclusion zone and mixing with boar populations in other parts of Europe, which is kind of concerning. So this may not be a living thing, but considering it's a glob of radioactive goo, I mean, I don't know, maybe it is. It's known as the elephant's foot, one of the most famous concoctions to come out of the Chernobyl disaster. After Reactor 4 blew up, a bunch of nuclear fuel, metal and concrete fused together under the plant and cooled into this massive lump of radioactive material, and it kinda looked like a deformed elephant's foot. Thus it was dubbed the elephant's foot. When this thing was first formed, it was putting out so much radiation that standing near it for just a few minutes could kill you. Not exaggerating. People who had to go near it in the early days of cleanup would get a lethal dose of radiation in minutes. One guy who filmed it back in the 80s was reportedly dead within a year. Even now, decades later, it's still dangerous. The radiation has cooled down a bit, but not enough to really make it safe. Scientists have kept an eye on it over the years because they were worried it might keep leaking radiation or start heating up again. It's also affected the air, water, and soil around it. They call the elephant's foot a kind of man-made lava, except instead of burning you, it poisons you. And yeah, it's still sitting there, deep under Reactor 4, slowly decaying, but still very dangerous. EV stands for this. It's sometimes referred to as the tree man disease. EV is an ultra-rare genetic condition that causes uncontrollable growth of wart-like lesions all over the skin. The weird thing is these lesions are caused by certain types of HPV, the same virus that causes common warts, but almost everyone's immune system fights off HPV before it gets serious. In EV patients, their immune system doesn't work properly against these HPV types. Scientists found mutations in 2 specific genes that seem to break the immune system's ability to control the virus, but they're not sure exactly why. Because of this, the HPV spreads unchecked, causing large, scaly lesions that can look kind of like tree bark, which is where the nickname tree man disease comes from. One of the most well-known cases was a man from Indonesia who lived with the condition for over 20 years before passing away. The lesions covered his hands, feet, and his face. Doctors don't have a cure, so treatment focuses on just removing the growths and managing infections. Diprosopis is a super rare condition where a person is born with parts of their face duplicated. This can mean anything from having 2 noses or 2 mouths to nearly just 2 full faces on one head. It's so rare that there have only been about 36 confirmed cases of this. Scientists think this happens because of a problem with a protein called sonic hedgehog, not making that up, which controls how the face develops before birth. When this protein is too active, it can cause the face to split or duplicate. But exactly why this happens in some pregnancies and not in others, it's still a mystery. Most people born with this don't survive long because the condition usually comes with other serious problems, especially in the brain and the internal organs. Sometimes the duplicated parts aren't fully formed, other times they're more complete. Doctors and researchers have studied cases over the years, but there's still no clear explanation for why it happens. It's not inherited, instead it seems to be a random error during early development. It's one of the rarest and most baffling birth anomalies recorded. Progeria is a crazy rare genetic condition where you age way faster than normal. It's caused by a mutation in a gene called LMNA, which makes a protein important for keeping cells stable. When that protein is messed up, cells get damaged faster, and the body shows signs of aging early. You'll have hair loss, wrinkled skin, heart problems. Kids with progeria usually look like tiny old people, even though they're actually really young. It's super rare, only about 400 cases have been confirmed around the world. Those born with it usually only live into their early teens, and most die from heart disease. There's no cure yet, but some treatments can help with symptoms and maybe slow down the aging a little. Even though scientists know the gene involved, the full picture of how this works at a molecular level is still a mystery, which makes it one of the most puzzling human mutations we know of. Next up is something called mermaid syndrome, which sounds kinda nice, but it isn't. Scientifically, it's known as cyanomelia. This is a rare condition where you're born with your legs fused together, looking kind of like a mermaid's tail. It's extremely uncommon and sadly, it's usually fatal because it comes with serious problems inside your body. You'll have missing or malformed kidneys and just lots of issues in this general area, as you can imagine. Doctors think it happens because the blood flow to the lower part of the fetus gets messed up early in pregnancy, but they don't fully understand why. Some studies say it might be caused by things like maternal diabetes or exposure to certain toxins, but they're not entirely sure. Unlike conditions caused by a single gene mutation, mermaid syndrome seems to come from a mix of things, but this is so rare that only a few hundred cases have ever been documented. Polycephaly means having 2 heads on one body. It's an extremely rare type of conjoined twins, where instead of 2 bodies, they're just one with 2 separate brains. Each case is different. Sometimes both heads have control over parts of the body, sometimes one is more dominant. How these twins share organs and nerve control varies a lot, so each case is unique, which makes it tricky for doctors. Scientists know polycephaly happens when an embryo starts to split into twins, but then doesn't fully separate. What's not clear is why it stops halfway, leaving 2 heads on one body. It's not inherited and seems to be a random developmental glitch early in pregnancy. Survival is rare because, contrary to what cartoon logic would have you believe, having 2 brains actually puts a huge strain on the body. It's not a good thing. There have been documented cases in both humans and animals, but very few survive for long. When they do, it raises all kinds of medical and ethical questions about treatment and quality of life. Even with modern medicine, scientists still don't fully understand how these twins' brains manage to coordinate the body or why the condition happens in the first place. Now, beside the massive catfish in the cooling ponds near Chernobyl, smaller fish in the rivers and lakes around Pripyat have shown some pretty unsettling traits. Researchers have talked about fish with physical deformities like missing eyes, bulging growths coming out of them, or just oddly shaped in general. The radiation that poured into the nearby waterways didn't just disappear, it seeped into the water, settling in the silt and got into the food chain. Small aquatic creatures absorbed it, and the fish that ate them absorbed even more. That kind of exposure messes with how cells divide and grow, and that's how you end up with fish that look like Blinky from The Simpsons. And then there are all the issues you can't see with the naked eye. Some fish are born sterile, others just don't live as long as they should, but there are still plenty swimming around. The strange thing is that some species have adapted better than others. Mutations don't always kill them off right away, they just make the fish look off. So while they might not be glowing like in cartoons, they're definitely not normal. This is one of the darkest and hardest to talk about. After the explosion, over 600,000 people were called in to help contain the disaster. These weren't all volunteers. Many were soldiers, firefighters, and regular workers who didn't fully understand how dangerous the job was. They were called liquidators, and their job was to clean up the mess, build the sarcophagus over the reactor, and stop the radiation from spreading. There's tons of footage and photographs of these people working away in Chernobyl, completely unaware of how the radiation would affect them later on. A lot of them went in without proper protection too, some with just a cloth mask or nothing at all, and the effects were brutal. Radiation burns, organ failure, thyroid cancer, and in some cases death within mere days. Some liquidators were exposed to such high doses that their bodies literally started breaking down on a cellular level. Some survivors lived for years afterward, but a lot of them did deal with long-term health issues like tumors, birth defects in their children, bone diseases. There are stories of liquidators who ended up completely isolated, physically and emotionally wrecked from what they experienced. So when people talk about mutations, it's not just fish and frogs, it's human lives that were permanently altered. If you want straight up visible proof of mutation from Chernobyl, check out the firebugs. These little red and black bugs are normally easy to spot because they have a really distinct pattern. But in the exclusion zone, researchers started finding ones that looked all kinds of messed up. Patterns were totally off. Some bugs had their markings in the wrong spots, others were missing parts altogether. Scientists Timothy Mousseau and Anders Moller actually did a study and found that the bugs living closer to the reactor were way more likely to have these deformities. They photographed tons of them and compared them to firebugs from outside the zone, and yeah, the difference is obvious. It's not the most dramatic mutation you'll ever see, but it's one of the clearest cases that got caught on camera. In February 2024, a farm in southwest Louisiana woke up to a very unusual birth. One of the cows at a farm called Brew Farms had given birth overnight to a calf with two faces. From the ears back, the body looked normal, but the front of the head had 4 eyes, 2 noses, and 2 mouths. The owners named the calf Two-Face. Cases like this are extremely rare. According to the farm, the odds of a birth like this are estimated to be around 1 in 400 million. Even more surprising, the calf was alive. That almost never happens. Most animals born with this condition, known as polycephaly, are stillborn or die just after birth. The calf couldn't stand on its own at first though, so the farmers had to support it with a sling and bottle feed it because it couldn't nurse normally from its mother. But both faces were actually functioning. The calf could breathe through both noses, and the eyes reacted to light and movement. The 2 mouths even moved together, although one was slightly deformed. Unfortunately, as expected, it didn't live long. It died after just 26 days. In 2019, researchers surveying the Pine Barrens in New Jersey came across something they almost never see in the wild. While checking a rattlesnake den, 2 researchers named Dave Schneider and Dave Burkett spotted a tiny newborn snake moving through the leaves. When they picked it up, they realized it had 2 fully formed heads on a single body. Since both the guys were named Dave, the snake quickly got the nickname Double Dave. The baby rattlesnake was only about 9 inches long and just a few weeks old. This kind of mutation is called bicephaly, which happens when what should have been identical twins don't fully separate during early development, so the embryo develops 2 heads on one body. Scientists say it's basically the reptile version of conjoined twins. Animals like this almost never survive long in the wild. Each head has its own brain, so they try to control the body at the same time. One head might want to move left, while the other wants to go right. Not the most efficient way to hunt or avoid predators. Not to mention when it comes to actually eating, both heads may compete for the same meal. So Dave and Dave decided to bring Double Dave into captivity where it could be studied and taken care of. In August 2019, a woman named Debbie Geddes was out fishing on Lake Champlain near the New York-Vermont border when she hooked what felt like a pretty solid catch. At first she just felt like it was a big trout, but when she finally pulled it into the boat, she immediately noticed this thing was not normal. It had two mouths, one above the other. When we got it in the boat, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Two mouths, and this fish was healthy and thriving, Debbie said. Photos of the trout were shared online by a local fishing group called Naughty Boys Fishing, and within days, thousands of people were sharing it and arguing about what could have caused it. Some thought it might be a genetic defect that happened while the fish was developing. Others wondered if it might have started as an injury that healed in a strange way. Even experienced fishermen who saw the photos said they'd never seen anything quite like it. Next up, we have a Guinness World Record-setting cat, or cats depending on how you look at it, Frank and Louie, or as some referred to them, Frank and Louie, which is kind of mean, but I also do kind of love that name. In 1999, a kitten was born in Massachusetts with an extremely rare condition called diprosopus, sometimes known as Janus condition. Instead of having two separate heads, the kitten had two faces on a single head. He had two mouths, two noses, and three eyes. Most cases like this end with the animal dying within a few days. Because of that, the kitten was set to be euthanized, but one veterinary nurse, Marty Stevens, decided to take the kitten home instead and see if she could keep him alive. She named one face Frank and the other Louie. Keeping him alive took a lot of work at first. Stevens tube-fed him until he was 3 months old because she was afraid he wouldn't be able to eat. Even though he had two faces, the cat only had one brain and one esophagus, and only one of the mouths actually worked for eating. The third eye in the center of his face didn't function and never blinked, so he looked like he was constantly staring. Kinda creepy, but Frank and Louie survived far longer than anyone expected. In 2012, Guinness World Records officially recognized him as the longest living Janus cat ever recorded. He ended up living 15 years, about the normal lifespan for a house cat. In August 1995, a group of middle school students visited a small wetland near Henderson, Minnesota, as part of a school field trip. While catching frogs along the edge of the pond, they started noticing something strange. A large number of the frogs had serious deformities. Some were missing legs, others had extra ones. A few had limbs that were bent or growing out at odd angles. When scientists investigated the site, they found that half of the frogs in that pond showed some type of abnormality. That number was far higher than what biologists would normally expect to see in the wild, and that was unsettling. Being that frogs live partly in water and partly on land, they're often used by scientists as an early warning sign that something may be wrong in the environment. So this set off a large investigation across Minnesota. Researchers surveyed wetlands around the state, examined nearly 25,000 frogs from 195 different locations. They documented deformities like extra limbs, partially formed legs, missing feet, and abnormal bone growth. In some wetlands, more than 60% of frogs were affected. One major cause scientists identified was a tiny parasitic worm called this. The parasite infects tadpoles while their legs are still forming. When that happens, it can mess up limb development, sometimes causing frogs to grow extra legs or deformed ones. But researchers also found that parasites didn't explain every case, and in some areas the exact cause was unclear. Fibroplasia ossificans progressiva, or FOP if you want to get all fancy. It's one of the rarest and weirdest genetic disorders. People with FOP have a mutation in a gene called ACVR1 that makes their body turn muscles, ligaments, and other soft tissue into bone. It's like their body starts building a second skeleton, slowly just traps them in place. Imagine your muscles turning to stone over time. Terrifying, but that's kind of what happens here. The mutation causes the body's normal repair process to go totally wrong. Instead of healing injuries like normal, the body just reacts by creating bone where it shouldn't. Scientists still don't fully understand why this happens, but they know it's tied to the way cells communicate during bone growth. FOP is very rare. Only about 800 cases have ever been documented. People with it usually start showing symptoms in early childhood, and it just gets worse over time. There's no cure, and surgeries to remove the extra bone often just make things worse because, as you can imagine, the body will just create more bone in response. Ectrodactyly is a rare condition where someone is born missing some of the middle fingers or toes, which makes their hand or foot look like a split, kind of claw-like. That's why it's sometimes called lobster claw hand. The exact causes are complicated. It happens because of changes in certain genes that control how fingers and toes develop in the womb. These gene changes can be different from person to person, which is why ectrodactyly can show up in a lot of ways. Some people might be missing just one finger, others have more severe splits. The condition doesn't follow a simple pattern. That means it doesn't always get passed down in families in a clear way. Sometimes it just happens randomly during development. The gene mutations affect the process where the hand or foot forms from tissue called the limb bud, causing the central digits not to develop or just to fuse together. This one isn't life-threatening though. A lot of people do live normal lives and find ways to adapt to it, although back in the day, they would usually be put in the circus. But because the exact gene changes can vary a lot, scientists don't fully understand why the condition happens or why it looks so different in different people. Hypertrichosis is a super rare condition where people grow way more hair than usual, thick hair, even on places that don't normally have it. It can show up at birth or develop later, but the form people are born with happens because of genetic mutations that mess with how their hair grows. One of the earliest recorded cases was a guy named Petrus Gonsalves from the 1500s, who had so much hair that people called him the werewolf man. The hair can cover the face, the arms, the back, sometimes just the whole body, making it look more like fur than hair. Even though it's not dangerous, it can obviously definitely make life pretty hard socially. I can only imagine how bad it must have been in the 1500s. I mean, some people would have been trying to drive a stake through his heart or burn him alive. Scientists still aren't totally sure why the mutation makes the hair grow so much or why it picks certain body parts to cover. There are only a few hundred confirmed cases around the world, so it's super rare. Marfan syndrome is a genetic condition that affects connective tissues, all the stuff that holds your body together, like skin, bones, and organs. People with Marfan usually have really long limbs and fingers, plus super flexible joints. Sometimes their hearts are affected as well, because the blood vessels, this happens because of a mutation in a gene called FBN1, which controls a protein called fibrillin-1. This protein gives strength and stretchiness to tissues, so when fibrillin-1 doesn't work right, the body parts it supports just get weaker and stretch out more than they should. Some people with this condition might barely notice it, others need serious medical care to protect their heart and lungs. With the right treatment and monitoring, most people with this live full, active lives. Scientists have learned a lot about this one, but they're still studying how to prevent the serious issues that it can cause. Imagine never feeling pain. I bet some people would wish for this, but for people with congenital insensitivity to pain, or CIP, it's actually a big problem. This rare genetic condition means their nerves don't send pain signals to the brain properly, so they don't notice when they're hurt. And because of this, they often injure themselves without realizing it. It might burn their skin, get infections. There have been cases of people with this condition breaking their bones and not knowing. CIP happens because of mutations in certain genes that interfere with how nerve cells send pain messages to the brain. Scientists study it closely because understanding this condition, it's not only going to help people with CIP, but they could also develop new pain treatments for everyone else. The tricky part is, since pain is the body's way of protecting itself, not feeling it means these people have to be extra careful all the time. In 1966, a gorilla was captured in a forest in Equatorial Guinea that looked completely different from any other gorilla anyone had seen. It had pure white fur, pale skin, and light blue eyes. The gorilla was named Snowflake, and he's still the only known albino gorilla ever documented. Albino animals like Snowflake are born without normal amounts of melanin, of course. Genetic testing later showed Snowflake's albinism came from a mutation in a gene he inherited from both parents. Because of this lack of pigment though, Snowflake was unusually sensitive to sunlight and prone to health issues. Unfortunately, this made him more vulnerable to skin cancer, which eventually caused his death in 2003. Snowflake spent most of his life at the Barcelona Zoo, where he became a huge attraction. Albino gorillas are so rare that scientists said this case was 1 in a million. After most woolly mammoths disappeared from the mainland, a tiny group survived on Wrangel Island in the Arctic for thousands of years. When scientists looked at their DNA, they found a lot of problems. These last mammoths had tons of harmful mutations building up over generations because the population was so small and isolated. Some of the mutations affected their fur, making it kind of satin-like instead of the thick wool we usually picture. Being so cut off, the mammoths couldn't get rid of these genetic problems, and over time it added up, making them weaker, less capable of dealing with sicknesses and changes in the weather. Scientists think this pile-up of bad mutations probably helped push the last Wrangel Island mammoths to extinction about 4,000 years ago. Just recently in Brazil, paleontologists came across a strange fossil jawbone in a riverbed. At first they thought it was just a deformed bone that had been pressed weirdly by rock, but when they found 8 more just like it, that's when they realized they'd found a whole new species. They named it Tunica amicola, and the fossils date back about 275 million years, long before dinosaurs ruled the planet. Its jaw was nothing like what you'd expect. Instead of teeth pointing up or down like normal animals, the main teeth pointed out to the sides. Even the part of the jaw that would face the tongue was twisted upward, covered in rows of tiny grinding teeth called denticles. The lead scientist who studied it, Jason Pardo, said the jaw has this weird twist that drove them crazy trying to figure out. They spent years wondering if it was a deformation until they realized every jaw had the same twist. Scientists think it used its jaw more like a grinder than a slicer, maybe chomping on plants or small bits of food in the water. They haven't found anything beyond the jaws yet, so things like what its body looked like are still a bit of a mystery. In 2011, a fisherman in the Gulf of California caught a pregnant dusky shark. When the shark was cut open, several embryos were found inside, and most of them looked normal, but one of them clearly didn't. The embryo, which was about 22 inches long, had a single eye sitting right in the center of its head. When photos of it started getting shared around online, people thought it had to be a hoax. I mean, just look at this thing. It looks like a Muppet. But marine biologists who looked at the specimen said the photos were real. The condition is called cyclopia, which happens when the front part of the brain doesn't split into 2 halves the way it normally does during early development. And because of that, the face never forms 2 eye sockets. The embryo ends up with 1 central eye instead. Researchers also noticed something interesting about the eye itself. It had actually developed optical tissue, so it had formed the way a regular eye would. Even so, sharks with this condition almost never survive. Cyclopia usually comes with severe brain problems, as you can probably imagine, and so it probably wouldn't have lived long if it had actually been born. In May 2025, a team called Rattlesnake Solutions was called to a backyard in Scottsdale, Arizona to pick up what they thought would be a pretty normal western diamondback rattlesnake. Instead, they got one that looked quite different. Instead of the standard crisscross diamond pattern these snakes are named for, this one was covered in round, curvy spots that looked more like a leopard's coat. When the team shared the photos of the snake on social media, they were just as amazed as everyone who saw the pics. In their words, in the many thousands of diamondbacks we've seen over the years, this is a first. That's wild when you think about, how many rattlesnakes they encounter every year. They didn't think it was a hybrid with another species either. The prevailing theory is that it's just a pattern mutation, a fluke genetic change that gave the snake the unusual spots. But according to the group's owner, Brian Hughes, this kind of thing is insanely rare. He said that over the past 25 years, only 3 snakes with a similar pattern mutation have ever been seen. This one, another near the same area in 2016, and the first about 20 years ago.
Number 5, the dodo bird. So dodo birds were once big and beautiful. These flightless ground nesting birds once filled the islands of the Indian Ocean. They had massive talons. They were pretty scary. They were gray and blue, so they were beautiful. They didn't have any natural predator, right? This sounds great. No natural predator until we came along, of course. Around 1507, the island was discovered by Portuguese sailors, and the rest, yeah, you can guess, the rest is history. They were the easiest bird to hunt, had the phrase dead as a dodo, right? They were easy to take out. They weren't just loved by sailors either. They were not 100% to blame here, okay? Monkeys, rats, pigs, any animal that made its way to the island just had their eggs for lunch. It was so easy. So it didn't take a long time for the dodo population to completely be gone. The last dodo was hunted in 1681, but could it be on this list? Could we bring back the dodo bird today? Hopefully, I mean maybe, I don't know. Scientists found an extremely well-preserved dodo skeleton back in 2007, so we may have a chance at picking apart some DNA. A research facility near Melbourne, Australia is currently trying to use pigeon genes to bring this bird back. Again, I'm all for science, I'm all for bringing animals back to life. You know, scientifically, that's a feat in itself. Great work, we love it. But do we really think no one's gonna make dodo bird chicken wings? That's a problem waiting to happen. As soon as I said it, you were like, oh, that would be pretty good.
Number 4, Pyrenean ibex. I'm just as confused as you guys are. The Pyrenean ibex went extinct 22 years ago. Last one was seen in 2000, my friends. The last one was a female named Celia. That's so nice. A falling tree sadly killed her. Oh my god. That's horrible. A subspecies of the Spanish ibex were once native to the Pyrenees Mountains on the border of Spain and France. Back in the Dark Ages, medieval times, their population was reduced drastically to an endangered level. They would roam the land, but knights with swords and bows and armies to feed, you know, you can kind of guess what happened there. Disease being spread by humans at this point also played an important role in their demise. Humans could barely keep up, let alone animals. The Pyrenean ibex was successfully cloned and brought back from extinction for a whopping 7 minutes. DNA from the last living lady was implanted into the womb of a domestic goat. Science is wild, dude. That's so crazy. Lung complications are why the clone didn't last longer than 7 minutes, but listen to what I just said. They made a clone for 7 minutes. It's a start.
Number 3, the Tasmanian tiger. Once native to Australia, classic, the Tasmanian tiger, also known as the thylacine, you have to say that in Australian accent, the thylacine. It was a massive thylacine. I'm gonna say that all day now. It was a massive carnivorous marsupial that went extinct around the 1930s. So major factors here, as you probably have guessed, climate change, hunting, and its genetic diversity wasn't all too great. It's sad on one hand because these beautiful creatures disappeared so recently, but it's recent enough that we have a shot at bringing them back. Yeah, just back to life. Hi, that was a close one. Go hunt. Yeah, imagine looking outside and seeing this thing on your front yard. Are we ready for this? I can barely handle like deer in Canada. I don't know. Squirrels, black squirrels, they're scary up in Canada. I don't know. Thank God for those jars though. About time we open those up. Some jars of organs, classic. Already we have some of the Tasmanian tiger genes present after scientists, inserted them into a mouse fetus and they're just waiting to see what happens. The Australian Museum has been working hard to bring this beast back to life and they're close. They're only still lacking the DNA fully to recreate it. So if you have any jars of Tasmanian tiger parts, comment down below, hit that thumbs up, let us know. We'll bring them back.
Number 2, the gastric brooding frog. That just sounds like it needs to be shot. I'm a big fan of frogs. I mean, I don't mind them, they're green and stuff and they're slimy, I guess. They're pretty cool. Except for when they hatch babies out of their backs. Taylor showed me a video of that earlier and I almost threw up. There's a joke there somewhere, but I don't know, that's just gross, dude. Why would you show me that, Taylor? Frogs are wild, but back in the day they were quite dangerous to be around. The gastric brooding frogs, for one, are so alien. These frogs would swallow its egg and hatch them from their mouth. No. So if you saw this in the wild, you would know. You might just see one soon. Maybe your kids will see one in the wild. Now they went extinct back in 1983, but scientists have figured out a way to implant dead cells into a fresh egg from an entirely different frog species. Let's just hope these new ones aren't born out of their back and we're golden. I don't have to think about that. Oh god. Oh.
And finally, number 1, the Megatherium. Mega, big last, number 1, mega number 1. That's actually not that big. We talked about bringing back the woolly mammoth, so what other Ice Age cast member can we see in live action in the future? Let's see. Perhaps the Megatherium, aka the giant ground sloth. Yeah, they're kind of cute. They're scary, but they're pretty cute. They're slow and cute. Sloths used to be a lot bigger than we think. We often laugh at them for being so slow. The movie Ice Age sure didn't help their case as the dodo birds. Of course, the giant ground sloth is closely related to our modern three-toed sloth, but luckily for us, today's sloths aren't the same size as an elephant. Yeah, because that would be a horror film, wouldn't it? If a giant elephant-sized sloth started to slowly climb a tree outside of my house, I'd be sick. I wouldn't wake up. I'd be like, that's it. I had a heart attack. That's the scariest thing I've ever seen. We may be able to bring this one back, although they died off 8,000 years ago. It's still possible. Anything is possible with science and a little hope and fear. DNA samples were extracted from their hair remains, so the next step is to develop a fetus in an artificial womb.
In our number 10 spot, we have Xiphactinus. Xiphactinus was a prehistoric fish that lived during the late Cretaceous period around 85 million years ago. It was a predatory fish that could grow up to 20 feet in length and weighed up to 1,500 pounds, making it one of the largest bony fish of all time. This fish had a long, streamlined body with powerful jaws and sharp sharp teeth that allowed it to hunt and devour smaller fish and marine reptiles. It had a unique adaptation in its skeleton with a hinged lower jaw that could open very wide, allowing it to swallow prey whole. How terrifying is that? Fossils of this fish have been found in North America, particularly in what is now Kansas and Alabama, as well as in Europe and South America. It is believed that this fish went extinct along with the dinosaurs at the end of the Cretaceous period, around 66 million years ago. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Godzilla shark. With a name like that, this creature is surely anything but disappointing. About 300 million years ago, these guys ruled the sea and were one of the most terrifying sea creatures ever on our planet. Fossils of these guys have been found in the Mazzano Mountains, which lie east of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and they were found in 2013 by paleontologist John Paul Hodnett. So think of a massive shark, but now picture it covered in scales, like a reptile. Okay, now add 12 rows of super sharp teeth, and also the largest dorsal fin spines of any shark that has ever lived. Okay, so now you've pretty much got a Godzilla shark. It was nicknamed the Godzilla shark because of its size, as the skeleton is the largest fossil of its kind ever discovered in the area, as well as the fact that its fin spines are so intriguing to look at. While it was called the Godzilla shark upon its discovery, it has since received a more official name of Hoffman's dragon shark, both to honor the family that owned the land where the skeleton was found, and as an homage to its monstrous and reptilian appearance. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Temnodontosaurus. Temnodontosaurus is a genus of extinct marine reptile belonging to the group of ichthyosaurs. They lived during the Jurassic period, approximately 180 to 150 million years ago. These guys were a large predator that could grow up to 33 feet or 10 meters long, with a very long and streamlined body that allowed it to swim quickly through the water. These guys had a long snout filled with sharp teeth that it likely used to catch and eat fish and squid. Fossil evidence suggests that they may have also been cannibalistic, with larger individuals preying on smaller ones. Like in ichthyosaurs, these guys gave birth to live young rather than laying eggs. I mean, it's the ocean. Several species of these guys have been described, with the most well-known being T. Platyodon. This species was first described in the early 19th century and is known from fossil remains found in Europe, particularly in Germany and the UK. T. Platyodon was named for its flattened teeth, which were adapted for crushing the shells of its prey. Overall, these guys were a formidable predator that dominated the Jurassic seas. Its large size and sharp teeth made it a fearsome sight for any smaller creatures that happened to cross its path. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Tylosaurus. These creatures belong to the family of mosasaurs, and they have long eel-like bodies that allowed them to smoothly cruise through the waters. They had the ability to have intense bursts of speed that propelled them to their prey, which they could quickly take down. The snout of these creatures is thought to have been quite large and robust compared to other species of mosasaurs, which has led researchers to believe that they may have used it to their advantage. To do this, they might have rammed into larger prey so that they were stunned. This gave them time to turn around and finish the prey with their large jaws. Despite these specialized skills, it seems as though these guys weren't very picky with what they ate, as they have been found with all kinds of remains found in their stomach area. These creatures were very large, but they are also way faster and more agile compared to other mosasaurs. What more could you want in a prehistoric predator? In our number 6 spot today, we have Heliocystis moroccensis. These guys are an extinct animal that lived around 520 million years ago during the Cambrian period. They were a small, bizarre-looking creature with a spiral-shaped body and a mouth surrounded by tentacles. These guys are known from fossil remains found in Morocco. Scientists believe that these guys were a filter feeder, using their tentacles to capture plankton from the water. The spiral shape of its body may have helped to control its buoyancy and to help them just stay afloat in the water. Its mouth was located at the center of the spiral, and its tentacles extended outward to capture food. These guys are a very important animal in the study of early life on Earth because it belongs to a group of animals known as echinoderms. Echinoderms are a diverse group of animals that include modern-day sea stars, sea urchins, and sea cucumbers, all of the weird things sitting on the ocean floor. The discovery of these guys has helped scientists to better understand the evolution and the diversity of echinoderms.
In our number 4 spot, we have the saber-toothed tiger. Okay, if scientists brought back this species, this would be insane. But do we really need another predatory species that want humans to die? We already have to deal with, lions, tigers, and the reptiles in our government, so I think I speak for all of us when I say this isn't necessary. But would be cool to witness. The saber-toothed tiger has been a wonder to many for so long. They are famously known for their long, curved canine teeth. It can weigh anywhere between 485 pounds to 961 pounds. It was approximately 39 inches tall. Its closest relative is the tiger, of course. They originated in North and South America about 10,000 years ago, so it would be extraordinary if scientists found a way to bring them out of extinction. In our number 3 spot, we have the glyptodont. The glyptodont is a larger subfamily of the armadillo. They were around from approximately 34 million years ago in South America, and when the continents became connected, they spread to North America. They were about 12 feet long and 1.5 feet high. They had fluted teeth, and they were covered in a thick, bony carapace. They went extinct approximately 7,000 to 8,000 years ago. It's so interesting how much bigger animals were thousands of years ago, and now all of these big animals have much smaller subfamilies that are alive today. I mean, obviously that's better for us humans, as the less threats we have physically, the better, but still interesting to note. In our number 2 spot, we have the quagga. Okay, so you're probably thinking, Melissa, is this not just a zebra? Yeah, it is a species of zebra, but it's still different and it's extinct, and scientists are thinking of bringing it back. The quagga went extinct in the 19th century, and one of the last pictures that we have of the quagga alive is from 1870 in a London zoo. It's a subspecies of zebra from South Africa. It's about 8 feet 5 inches long and 4 feet 5 inches tall. It has a sandy brown coat with a white tail and stripes from the top to the middle part of its body. They were herbivores and would typically live 20 to 40 years. They look, pretty majestic to me. I hope this is a species that scientists are able to bring back. In our number 1 spot, we have the ground sloth. The ground sloth is from South Africa and went extinct approximately 11,000 years ago, and some of the species of ground sloths have been extinct longer. The Megatherium, for example, has been extinct for 12,000 years, and this one in particular looks more like a bear than a sloth. It was massive and could be up to 20 feet tall, weighing about 6,600 pounds. Imagine these sloths were just roaming the world today. There are already enough scary bears in the world. I feel like, we're good without this one. But still, this would be an unbelievable breakthrough if we could bring back these creatures. Although I am sure that they wouldn't be as friendly as Sid from Ice Age. That short, cute little guy wouldn't hurt a fly. His lisp is literally the cutest thing in the world. But anyways, would be cool if they came back.
In our number 5 spot today, we have the megalodon, okay? My favorite, your favorite, everyone's favorite. Is any terrifying prehistoric sea creatures list truly complete without an appearance from the Meg? Megalodons are one of the largest sharks to have ever existed. They were huge, they were terrifying, they were apex predators, and they are the creatures that inspired the tales of Jaws, or the Meg. The teeth on these sharks are so large that they are 3 times larger than the teeth of a modern great white shark. With teeth that size, you can only imagine how large this shark would have been. It's pretty tough to figure out exactly why the megalodon died out. I mean, they were one of the largest, scariest creatures who shouldn't have had any trouble getting food, but that might not be the case. Some believe it was the cooling waters, others believe it was the competition for food. Whatever the case in the end, while the megalodon is an incredible creature in history, I think we can all breathe a sigh of relief that they aren't currently swimming around our oceans. Or are they? In our number 4 spot today, we have the Opabinia regalis. Opabinia regalis is an extinct animal that lived around 505 million years ago during the Cambrian period. It was a small, bizarre-looking creature with a long, segmented body that measured up to about 7 centimeters in length. Pretty tiny compared to the other giants on this list. Opabinia had 5 eyes and a nozzle-like proboscis at the front of its body, which is likely used to grab prey from the sea floor. Opabinia is an important animal animal in the study of early life on Earth because it belongs to a group of animals known as arthropods. Arthropods are a diverse group of animals that includes things like insects, spiders, and crustaceans. Opabinia is unique among arthropods because of its unusual body plan and its feeding habits. They likely fed on small invertebrates and other small animals on the sea floor. Its proboscis may have been used to probe the sediment for prey, and its 5 eyes likely helped it to locate prey in low light conditions. These guys are known from fossil remains found in the Burgess Shale Formation in British Columbia, right here in Canada. The Burgess Shale is a world-famous fossil site that has yielded many important discoveries in the study of early life on Earth. Opabinia is just one of the many fascinating and bizarre creatures that lived during the Cambrian period. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Helicoprion. This animal existed somewhere around 250 million years ago, and while it looks more like a shark than anything else, scientists now know that it was actually a creature that is related more closely to chimeras, which are a fish that separated from the shark family about 400 million years ago. So why is this animal just so scary and terrible to look at? Well, that is due to the incredibly unsettling spiral saw formation of teeth that this creature had right on their lower jaw. Yeah, an orthodontist's dream, truly. It's also not like this creature was just born with this teeth that they had for the rest of their lives. No, of course not. They had teeth that could grow, and new teeth could even form. Imagine being in the ocean and you see a huge creature swim up to you that has 4 spiral saws for teeth. Yeah. No thanks. Never going swimming. In our number 2 spot today, we have Cephalaspis. Cephalaspis is an extinct fish that lived around 400 to 360 million years ago during the Devonian period. It has a flattened, armored head and a small, streamlined body that measured up to about 60 centimeters in length. These guys likely lived in freshwater environments and fed on small invertebrates and plankton. These guys had a bony plate on the top of their head that protected their brain and their sensory organs. This plate, known as a cephalic shield, was shaped like a triangle and had 2 large openings for the eyes. These guys also had a pair of small paddle-shaped fins near the front of their body that they used for swimming. These guys are an important animal in the study of early fish evolution because it is one of the earliest known jawless fish. Jawless fish include modern-day lampreys and hagfish. They lack the jaws and paired fins that are found in most modern fish. These guys are known from their fossil remains that have been found in many parts of the world, including Europe, North America, and Asia. The discovery of these guys have helped scientists to better understand the early evolution of fish and the diversification of life during the Devonian period. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have Anomalocaris. These guys are an extinct animal that lived around 500 million years ago during the Cambrian period, and they were a large predatory animal that measured up to a meter in length. These guys had a circular mouth surrounded by spiny plates, which it likely used to grasp and crush its prey. These guys are an important animal in the study of early life because they are one of the earliest known arthropods. These guys are unique among arthropods, however, because they have a very unusual body plan and also unusual feeding habits. They had a segmented body and a pair of large paddle-shaped appendages at the front that helped it swim through the oceans. Its circular mouth was lined with sharp teeth, and its spiny plates may have been used to grasp and manipulate their prey. These guys are known from fossil remains found in many parts of the world, including Canada, China, and Australia. They're kind of all over the place. The discovery of these guys has helped scientists to better understand the early evolution of arthropods and just, what was going on during the Cambrian period.
And at number 2, we have the Megaraptor. These were actually closer to the T-Rex than they were the raptor actually, but they were much faster and more dexterous than the T-Rex. They also had the use of their hands, which would have made them a terrifying threat. The Megaraptor was a member also of the theropod family, known for its sharp claws, carnivorous habits. These guys had enormous sickle-shaped claws, not on their feet like other raptors, but on their hands, which could reach lengths of nearly 14 inches. These claws were its primary weapon for hunting, used to slash through the hides of prey with very deadly precision. The name Megaraptor actually translates to giant thief. When this thing was first discovered, it was misidentified because of a mismatched discovery of claws and other bones. It was thought to be closer related to the Velociraptor family, but it was later discovered the claws belonged to a different, larger dinosaur, leading to the creation of the genus Megaraptor. Its fossils have been dug out throughout South America. Its habitat would have been a mix of forests and then open plains, and it probably preyed on smaller dinosaurs and other creatures using those claws. And finally, we have Carnotaurus, the meat-eating bull. Just look at this monster. Incredibly intimidating, but relatively compact compared to some of its larger dinosaur relatives. It's of course known for the pair of horns above its eyes, giving it a bull-like appearance. Also kind of demonic to me. These horns, coupled with the deep skull and powerful jaw muscles, likely means that Carnotaurus didn't just take out weaker species, but probably fought amongst themselves too, using their headgear to establish dominance over one another and attract mates. They had a streamlined body, meaning they were probably fast and agile. Then you got those hilariously stubby arms. Definitely detracts from the fear factor a bit, but it compensated with those big juicy legs in the back. Its fossils have been primarily found in South America, specifically in Argentina.
And now at number 8, we have the Tasmanian tiger. Before researching for this list, I had no idea that these things ever existed. I've heard of the Tasmanian devil, but not the Tasmanian tiger. These creatures predominantly hunted at night, and their prey includes kangaroos, wallabies, small mammals, and birds. Hopefully we're not considered small mammals. Well, apparently they would chase after their prey over long distances, slowly tiring them out, and then without warning they would sprint and grab their victims by the neck. They were able to open up their jaws to about a 120-degree angle, and sometimes they would even hop around on 2 legs. I mean, what a weird animal. They eventually died out in the 1930s, but that's not stopping scientists from one day bringing them back from the dead to live amongst us. Number 7, we have the Irish elk. This animal was one of the largest deer to ever walk on the earth. It's suspected that these animals roamed the earth about 7,700 years ago in Siberia, and our current red deer or fallow deer might have some similar genes to the Irish elk. They stood at a height of about 7 feet tall, and their massive antlers measured in at a whopping 12 feet long. I mean, is this real life right now? Those humongous antlers probably did some serious damage back in the day. Well, not really. Apparently their antlers weren't the best in battle. It was mainly used as a way to attract the ladies. In either case, I think the Irish elk would give our current moose a run for their money. Unless it's a Canadian moose. Canadian mooses are extremely large. For those of you guys who are scared of birds, you might want to take cover because in at number 6 we have the moa. These guys were flightless birds that lived in New Zealand. They went extinct about 700 years ago, which is actually pretty recent if you think about it. But now scientists believe that they are getting very close to bringing these large birds back from the dead. The moa were extremely tall. They measured in at about 12 feet and weighed over a ton. I mean, what the heck did these guys eat? I need to get on this moa diet when I'm ready to put on some serious muscle gains. They were also very swift runners. They were able to defend themselves by kicking whenever they got cornered. Thankfully, they mainly ate seeds, fruits, leaves, and grass, so you know what? I'd gladly welcome these guys back if we managed to bring them back from extinction. But I know a few people who are scared of birds who would probably want to stop this from happening altogether.
Number 9, the woolly rhinoceros. Yeah, since we're on the woolly train, what better time to mention this hairy beast? The woolly rhino. I oddly want to pet him. Just one brush. Once upon a time, these rhinos were common throughout Europe and Asia. They were well prepared for the cold tundra. They had a thick blanket of fur, just like the old woolly mammoth. So no ice age will stop this rhino. I mean, it didn't help them out, but it was mostly humans needing food and warmth that led to their extinction. But cut to 14,000 years later, we're trying to apologize. We're trying to make it up to them by bringing them back to life. Hi, you exist now. Isn't that great? To a world that's even more harsh. Yeah, remember when it was cold? Well, now it's really warm. Good game, rhinos. Might want to go get a haircut. The same company responsible for the Mammoth Project is also trying to bring back this hairy boy. I mean, I'm all for science, don't get me wrong, but if these species died off that long ago, will highways help? Probably not.
Number 8, the heath hen. It's interesting, I don't know anything about that. Here we go. Finally something that isn't the size of a minivan. I'm already excited. The heath van we lost quite recently actually, which of course is sad. We're losing birds rapidly, especially in North America. Our prairies are shrinking and they're being converted to agriculture. By 1870, the only remaining heath hens were protected in a vineyard, or a vineyard. I'm not sure how that's pronounced. But sadly, when 1932 rolled around, those fluffy dudes were no more. Also, Thanksgiving dinners didn't help. I get hungry sometimes. Yeah, we ate another animal to extinction. I'm seeing a pattern here. However, all hope is not lost for the heath hens, hence the title of this list. A company called Revive and Restore, good name, they're trying to get these hens back to the sky rather than back on our plates. They've been working with the community since 2014 with some scientific help from the prairie chicken.
Number 7. Great auk. Once thriving in colonies off North Atlantic coasts, the great auk would grow up to 30 inches long, and its tiny little wings would only be used to swim, so don't get too excited. These little balls of fluff did not fly in the skies. Their wings were really tiny. They were like 13 centimeters long, just little... They were cute, but quite defenseless. I don't know if you could have picked up on that. You know, very cute, very defenseless, obviously. Fluffy dudes. Around the 1500s, European fishermen discovered this perfect area for hunting, and it just happened to be where most, if not all, these great auks were thriving. Newfoundland, yeah, it looked like the iceberg in Club Penguin at this point. It was packed. It was a good time if you weren't a great auk. You were eating good if you were a fisherman, so their number rapidly declined. By 1950, the last 2 known specimens were hunted by one single fisherman on Eldey Island, just off the coast of Iceland. One dude just Thanos'd an entire bird species. What a monster. Scientists plan on using genetic information extracted from their fossils or preserved organs. You know, we love organs in jars. So they plan on editing their DNA with the closest living species, which is now the razor-billed auk. The organization Revive and Restore is behind the wheel on this one again. You'll see these names come up a few times over and over on this list because, yeah, not too many companies are trying to revive dead animals. What do you know?
Number 6. The Steller Sea Cow. Named after George Wilhelm Steller, who discovered this ball of blubber back in 1741. The Steller sea cow was first discovered during the Vitus Bering's Great Northern Expedition. They found her right after the crew became shipwrecked. Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse. Here's a surprise sea cow to confuse you. Good luck! They were quite common millions of years ago, but sadly, and unsurprisingly, they were no match for humans. They only swam about 1 meter deep, so they were quite easy to hunt. George Steller assures that these creatures were made of pure love. They had strong bond with their families, which made it even easier to hunt. That's sick. Taylor. That's Taylor. Wow, that's really sad. What's also sad is my pronunciation of gestation, considering they had a 1-year gestation period. The species just couldn't reproduce fast enough to keep up with the hunting. But scientists were able to sequence their genome, which means we could see these creatures again one day. The answer may lie in the DNA of a dugong. Is that a Pokemon? That's a Pokemon, isn't it? That's a Pokemon. Isn't it?
And now at number 3, we have the Siberian unicorn. I guess unicorns really did exist, I kid you not, except they didn't look like the typical white horse that, we see in fairy tale books. So let's take a look at what this thing looks like. Here it is right here. The Siberian unicorn lived up until 39,000 years ago. They were 1.9 meters tall, about 4 meters long, and weighed in more than 4 tons. These massive creatures probably went extinct due to the drastic climate change, loss of vegetation, and of course human hunting. But just like the other creatures on our list, scientists believe that they can potentially bring back this animal and reintroduce them into its natural habitat. But I'm thinking that the Siberian unicorn is probably better off staying extinct. I don't think that they would be able to live in our current environmental conditions. I mean, why would we want them to suffer? Haven't we already done enough damage? Topping our list at number 1, we have the Neanderthals. About 45,000 years ago, Homo sapiens lived alongside Neanderthals who had their own society, tools, and cultural practices. They most likely went extinct due to competition for resources, climate change, disease, or a combination of all those things. However, with our recent advancements with the genetic technologies, Neanderthals could possibly make a return to our civilization. Scientists are proposing that they can use the gene editing tools and DNA sequences to bring them back to life. But it's also important to note that we would not be bringing back a perfect copy of a Neanderthal, and I think it would be unethical to bring them back. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think it's awesome that de-extinction could be something that happens in our lifetime, but we also have to be very careful. I mean, we all saw what happened in Jurassic Park. They were able to bring back the dinosaurs, but was that a good idea? I don't think so.
Number number 10 spot we have the elephant bird. The elephant bird became extinct approximately 1000 to 1200 CE, and it is most likely due to human activity due to hunting, climate and vegetation change, and habitat loss due to deforestation. These birds are from the ratite family, Epornithidae, and they were enormous flightless birds. They used to live in Madagascar. They stood about 9.8 feet tall and weighed approximately 1,600 pounds. Their closest living relative is the kiwi bird. It is said that they most likely ate low-hanging fruit, even though they look like they could gobble you up in one go. I would have personally thought them to be carnivores, but thankfully not. I would be fine if scientists brought them back. Any herbivore, is fine, but if they pulled a Jurassic Park on us and brought back the carnivores, then I would not be okay. In our number 9 spot, we have the Pyrenean ibex. The Pyrenean ibex was basically a wild goat. When people say that they love goats, I'm always a little perplexed. Why? Just why? Watch my dad will for sure watch this episode and will say something like, "Hey, I love goats," and yes, he does indeed. I don't know why. He's always sending me goat videos when he goes to his friend's farm. I shall never understand. Anyways, this wild goat was 5 feet long and apparently 30 inches tall. It was found in southwestern Europe, and the species died out in 2003, which is really not that long ago. I was 13. Shoot, I need to stop giving away my age. I mean, I was just born. Anyways, the last goat was born and died 7 minutes after its birth due to a lung defect. Hunting, inbreeding, and other factors basically caused this goat's extinction over time. Honestly, it's a bit of a shame that this goat no longer exists because it looks rather majestic, much more classier than regular goats. In our number 8 spot, we have the Chinese river dolphin. It breaks my heart to think that a species of the dolphin might be extinct, but sadly it is. The Chinese river dolphin, known as the baji, sadly went extinct in 2002. It primarily lived in freshwater rivers, primarily in the Yangtze River. The main reason for its extinction is due to the impact of humans. It was directly targeted by meat lovers, but also due to an increasing amount of construction projects on the river. The dolphin, who relies primarily on its sonar capabilities, found it hard to navigate for food because of the construction noise. Pollution in the waters also didn't help either, as well as overfishing. The males were about 7.5 feet long, while the females could be about 8.2 feet. I have a soft spot for dolphins, so honestly I really hope scientists are able to bring this one back. In our number 7 spot, we have the dodo bird. The dodo bird is a bird that I would probably be terrified of if I was in a room alone with it, as it's just kinda scary looking. I don't know. I'm not a massive fan of birds in general, so maybe my biases. The dodo bird lived on the island of Mauritius. The bird was about 3.3 feet tall when alive. They went extinct in the 17th century, so quite a long time ago now. What did they eat? Well, their diet primarily consisted of eating from a specific tree that was, called the dodo tree, but the scientific name for the tree is called tambalacoke tree. They also ate nuts, fruits, roots, and small insects. So really, I would have nothing to be afraid of. I bet it would totally mess me up though, cause they were, big birds. My scrawny self would just hide. In our number 6 spot, we have the Tasmanian tiger. The Tasmanian tiger, despite its name, isn't actually a tiger, but was named this due to its tiger-like characteristics. The tiger only recently went extinct in the 20th century in 1936. The species slowly began to decrease about 2,000 years ago due to pressure from indigenous human settlers. They lived primarily in Australia and New Guinea. They were typically 39 inches to 51 inches long and 24 inches high. They have a close living relative, and that's the Tasmanian devil and the numbat. Not gonna lie, I had no idea the Tasmanian devil was a real animal. I totally thought it was just a lovable cartoon character, so I'm shook. Anyone else? Apparently there is hope for the Tasmanian tiger, as with recovering a little DNA, it may be possible to de-extinct the species. I hope scientists are able to.
Number 10 spot, we have Dolly the sheep. We had to start this list off with Dolly today because she really set the stage for everything on this list to come. You may have heard of Dolly the sheep before, and that is because she made history in 1996 when she was born. This is because she was the very first mammal to be cloned from an adult somatic cell. The process of cloning to create her involved nuclear transfer from a cell taken from the mammary gland. Basically, they transferred the nucleus from the adult cell into an unfertilized premature egg that had its nucleus removed, and boom, cloned sheep. This was huge for the scientific community because of the fact that it not only showed that cloning can be successful in mammals, but also because it showed that a cloned organism can be produced from a mature cell from a specific body part. While Dolly made history, she also sadly only lived a relatively short life. She ended up being euthanized just before her 7th birthday because of the fact that she had a progressive lung disease as well as arthritis, both of which are said not to be linked to her cloning origins. I guess it's kind of cool that Dolly existed, and the fact that we have these scientific abilities is amazing, but there's also something pretty ominous about it. I just hope we use these powers to do things like bringing back extinct animals, maybe, rather than some weird, mad scientist type of stuff. In our number 9 spot today, we have Samrupa. After the birth of Dolly the sheep, scientists everywhere began trying their hand at cloning, and that is when Samrupa was born. Back in 2009, Samrupa was born in India and was a Murrah buffalo, which is known as being the best known milking buffalo, since these animals can be capable of producing 35 kilograms of milk a day. The birth of Samrupa marked a breakthrough in the country because it put India on the map as one of the few countries at the time who had the capabilities to clone, and this was all done using a new at the time landmark technique which was called hand-guided cloning. The scientists who helped to create Samrupa worked on the calf for 4 years, so it's clear that they were all very excited about its birth. Unfortunately, however, shortly after Samrupa's birth, things went seriously wrong. Just 5 days after birth, Samrupa unfortunately succumbed to a lung infection and passed away. While the scientists weren't able to save the animal, it is very clear that its birth and short life helped scientists in remarkable ways that went on to inform them in future experiments and projects. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Pyrenean ibex. The Pyrenean ibex is an animal that went extinct around 2000. In a horrible turn of events, the last one was a female named Celia, and she was killed in an awful falling tree incident. A subspecies of the Spanish ibex, the Pyrenean ibex were native to the Pyrenees Mountains on the border of Spain and France. Back in the medieval ages, their population was reduced drastically to an endangered level. This is due to 2 things: being hunted as well as the spread of human disease. Flash forward to 2003, however, and scientists tried to bring them back to life. This is the first extinct creatures that scientists ever tried to clone. That is absolutely crazy. For 7 minutes. DNA from Celia, the last living individual of the species, was taken and implanted into the womb of a domestic goat. From here, the clone was in fact born, but due to lung complications was unable to survive for longer than 7 minutes. It was a short life, but a monumental one that definitely broke new ground in the scientific world. In our number 7 spot today, we have Garima 1. Garima is similar to Samrupa that we already talked about, and in fact she was born in the same place, the National Dairy Research Institute, just shortly after Samrupa, and luckily her birth did end up being more successful considering she made it past the first year of life. She was actually cloned on June 6th, 2009, and things seemed to be going quite well until around June and July of 2011. Garima was created through the same hand-guided cloning technique as Samrupa, so it's clear that the technique was evolving and getting better, but things still unfortunately went awry. When things took a turn for the worst, doctors struggled to figure out exactly what was the problem, but eventually it was revealed that her problem was with her heart. Researchers revealed that her heart was abnormally overweight and much larger in size than other buffaloes her same age, and this likely led to the complications she faced that sadly culminated in her passing in August of 2011. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Argali. In the earlier days of cloning experiments, scientists attempted to clone an Argali, which is also known as a type of mountain sheep. These sheep are known to roam the highlands of western East Asia, the Himalayas, Tibet, and the Altai Mountains. The reason they wanted to clone these sheep is because they are important to the ecosystems they live in, and unfortunately they are a threatened species. Now, I know there's controversy over the cloning of threatened or extinct species, but personal opinions aside, they were making this attempt to see if this could be a viable way to potentially save a species. Unfortunately, however, these attempts would prove to be futile. Using the same techniques used in the instance of Dolly the sheep, the somatic cell nuclear transfer, while they believed it would be promising, all attempts to clone the mammal failed to produce any viable results, and thus modern science wasn't able to assist in the continuation of this species. But in good news, while the species is still threatened, it is still around and not quite endangered, although its life is mainly threatened due to trophy hunters and ranchers.
The Pyrenean ibex, also called the bucardo, was a wild mountain goat that lived in the Pyrenees Mountains between Spain and France. It was extinct in 2000 when the last known female, named Celia, died after getting caught under a fallen tree. But scientists were not ready to give up on the species. In 2003, researchers used frozen skin samples from Celia to try cloning her. They took DNA from those samples, inserted it into goat eggs, and implanted the embryos into domestic goat surrogates. For a brief moment, it worked. A cloned ibex was born, the first time an extinct animal had been brought back to life. But the clone only survived about 7 minutes. It had really bad lung problems, so technically, the Pyrenean ibex went extinct 2 times. But the experiment was not a total failure. It proved cloning was possible, it just had to be perfected. The northern white rhino was nearly extinct by 2018. There were only 2 left in the world, and they were both female, so it really looked like this was it. But scientists in Kenya, along with members of the Leibniz Institute for Zoo and Wildlife Research in Germany, and the San Diego Zoo's Frozen Zoo, collected eggs from the 2 surviving females and used frozen sperm from males that had already died. The plan is to make embryos in the lab and implant them into southern white rhino females who can act as surrogate moms. That way the babies would be northern white rhinos just born from a closely related species. The process is not easy though. Rhinos have really long pregnancies, around 16 months, and getting in vitro fertilization to work in rhinos is super tricky, but the team's already made some healthy embryos and now they're focused on getting one of them to actually develop into a living calf. If this works, the northern white rhino would go from being basically extinct to having a real chance at survival again. It's a long road, but it's probably the species' only chance. Next up, we have Dolly the sheep. Now, obviously, sheep aren't extinct, but this was the first mammal cloned from an actual adult cell. This changed everything. Back in 1996, scientists took a cell from a Finn Dorset sheep and transferred its nucleus into an egg cell that had its own DNA removed. This egg was then implanted into a surrogate sheep, and out came Dolly, the world's first cloned mammal. She wasn't the first animal cloned overall, but cloning from an adult cell showed that mature cells could be sorta reprogrammed to develop into an entire animal. Dolly lived for 6 years, had 6 lambs. Cloning was now more than just science fiction. By the late 80s, black-footed ferrets were basically extinct in the wild. Luckily, a small group was found in Wyoming in 1981, and conservationists captured some to start breeding them in captivity. But since the population was so small, the ferret's genes were too similar. Too much mixing of similar genes is obviously not a good thing. There needs to be some variation in there. So in 2020, the group Revive and Restore cloned a ferret named Elizabeth Ann to help fix this, using frozen cells from a wild ferret. Elizabeth Ann was born healthy and released back into the wild to add some new genetic variety into the ferret population. The Przewalski's horse is the last truly wild horse species on Earth. Wild meaning it was never domesticated. These horses used to roam the steppes of Central Asia, but by the late 60s, they were pretty much mostly wiped out. The main reasons were overhunting, plus fences and farms pushing them out of their habitats. After that, the only Przewalski's horses left were stuck in zoos and breeding programs. But in 2020, scientists used frozen tissue from a stallion named Kaporovic, stored for 40 years in a frozen zoo, to clone a healthy baby named Kurt in Texas. A few years later, they cloned Kurt's genetic twin, Ollie. These clones brought fresh genes into the very small population, and now these horses are being released back into the wild. This is probably the most successful de-extinction case in history, hopefully not the last.
In our number 5 spot today, we have the gar. A gar is a species of wild cattle that is native to South Asia and Southeast Asia, and unfortunately they're listed as a vulnerable species on the IUCN Red List, and they have been since 1986. This is exactly why, in 2001, scientists decided it was time to try and clone one. With a population that has declined over 70% in the last 3 generations, they seemed like a perfect candidate to become the first ever endangered species to be cloned. In 2001, at the Trans-Ova Genetics Center in Sioux Center, Iowa, they were able to birth a clone gar. They obviously used gar DNA, but used a domestic cow as a surrogate mother to carry the clone. This of course was a huge breakthrough, but unfortunately the life of the gar was cut short as the calf passed away within 48 hours of its birth. Although this is obviously terrible, I guess the upside is that it is believed that the calf passed due to dysentery, which is not thought to have been related to the cloning process, which does mean that although the outcome wasn't as predicted or hoped, the cloning could still be considered a success.
After the Chernobyl disaster, one of the first obvious signs of mutation was in the local bird populations. Researchers started noticing barn swallows with bright white patches, a condition called partial albinism, which is rare under normal circumstances. And along with the odd coloring though, some birds had twisted beaks, deformed toes, and strangely shaped tail feathers. These weren't just small defects either. Some of the beak deformities made it almost impossible for the birds to feed properly. According to studies published in journals like Biological Conservation, these mutations were especially common within the highly contaminated areas closest to the reactor. The bird survival rates were much lower than normal too. A lot of the albino swallows didn't make it through their first year. Scientists figure the radiation damaged their DNA, leading to these visible abnormalities. Interestingly, the frequency of these mutations actually gives researchers clues about how dangerous certain areas still are today. High numbers of mutated swallows usually means higher residual radiation levels. Even now, generations later, you could still find birds around Chernobyl with unusual markings or growth defects. Inside Chernobyl, scientists discovered something totally unexpected. Some species of fungi show a phenomenon called radiotropism, where instead of growing toward light like normal plants, these fungi actually grow toward radioactive material. According to research shared by the National Institutes of Health, these fungi use melanin, the same pigment that gives human skin its color, to absorb radiation and turn it into energy. Almost like photosynthesis, but instead of using sunlight, they're using deadly gamma rays. So not only can these fungi handle huge doses of radiation that would kill most living things, they actually prefer it. Samples were even brought up to the International Space Station to see how they would react to cosmic radiation, and again, they were just fine. One of the eeriest sights in Chernobyl is the Red Forest, a place where pine trees absorbed so much radiation that they turned rusty red before dying. But some trees didn't just die, they mutated. According to the BBC, researchers noticed that a lot of pine trees developed strange needles. Instead of fanning out like normal, their needles were clumped together in these thick, tangled bunches. In some cases, the trees looked almost like natural bonsai, stunted, twisted, sometimes missing their tops completely. Normally, pines grow in a clean, upward pointing shape, but radiation damage scrambled their growth patterns. Mutations affected how cells divided and how these trees structured their branches and leaves. Some trees stayed abnormally small even decades later, others grew in these chaotic, knotted shapes. Scientists say the Red Forest today is one of the most radioactive outdoor places on Earth, so it makes sense that the trees would be kinda messed up. While a lot of animals around Chernobyl died off after the meltdown, some species, like the bank vole, a small rodent, adapted pretty well. According to a study in Nature Communications, these rodents show clear signs of genetic damage. Their DNA has more breaks and mutations compared to voles living outside the zone, but instead of dying out, a lot of them have somehow developed to better repair their DNA. It's not that the radiation didn't mess them up, it absolutely did. Researchers just found evidence of abnormalities. What's crazy though, is that these voles are still surviving in one of the most contaminated parts of the world. Some scientists think natural selection favored ones that could fix their damaged DNA better, allowing them to pass those traits on. Rotifers, microscopic animals that live in fresh water, have been studied in Chernobyl's contaminated ponds. According to Frontiers in Microbiology, researchers found that rotifers from the exclusion zone can survive much higher doses of radiation than ones outside it. Instead of just dying from DNA damage like you'd expect, these rotifers seem to have upgraded at a cellular level. They developed better systems of repairing their DNA, and possibly even in ways to protect it from radiation damage in the first place. Rotifers are already known for surviving crazy conditions like being frozen solid or dried out for years, but Chernobyl pushed them even further. These little guys adapted in a way that scientists are still trying to fully understand. And now, some researchers are looking into whether the rotifers' abilities could help humans or other animals deal with radiation better one day. Right after the Chernobyl explosion, researchers started noticing that insects were showing some changes. Beetles and grasshoppers with missing parts became pretty common. The worst mutations showed up in areas closest to the reactor, where radiation levels were just off the charts, of course. Insects would hatch with warped or missing body parts that made it almost impossible for them to survive. Wings would come out crumpled, antennae, which insects need to sense their environment, would be stubs or just completely gone. Some beetles had legs growing in the wrong places or extra limbs. Scientists were able to connect the number and severity of deformities directly to how much radiation the insects were exposed to. The first few years after the disaster saw the worst of it, obviously. Over time, the number of severe mutations dropped, mostly because the most damaged insects didn't survive to reproduce. In April of 2023, Australian farmers at a small hobby farm in Queensland noticed one of their hens had not 2, not 3, but 4 legs. 2 extra limbs dangled awkwardly from her rear end. Now, what's really interesting about this case is that the other chickens noticed this, and they did not like it. They bullied her. They pecked at the extra legs, pecked so hard that feathers fell out and a wound formed. The chicken had polymylia, a rare birth defect where extra limbs form, usually when an embryo starts as a twin and then reabsorbs but leaves parts behind. And looking at this chicken, you can see that these are full legs. They're not just these little stumps that barely look like legs, they're functional. A local farmer eventually rehomed the 4-legged hen to someone willing to take care of her separately, otherwise the rest of the flock would have tormented her, probably to death. In the late 90s, people started finding frogs with freakish mutations all across North America, like legs growing out of their faces or 2 extra limbs near their chest. One kid in Minnesota came across a 5-legged bullfrog in 1996, and stories kept rolling in from states like Wisconsin and even into Quebec, Canada. It wasn't a cartoonish anomaly. These deformities were very real. There were misshapen eyes as well, appendages sprouting in weird spots, and sometimes even had mixed reproductive bits. Researchers weren't sure what was going on here, but eventually they landed on this messy cocktail of causes. Parasites burrowing into tadpoles, chemicals seeping into ponds, UV light messing with embryos, and just predators biting off limbs that then regrew in wonky ways. They called it a sign something was going wrong with the environment. Over time, they narrowed it down to 4 main issues, but no single culprit explains every case. These frogs are still popping up today, just thankfully not in huge numbers, but every once in a while someone pulls a limbless tadpole or a frog with an eye in its shoulder out of a pond. In 2020, a homeowner in Florida was surprised when her daughter brought a tiny snake into the house. The cat had caught it. Small, but it still shocked her because it had 2 fully formed heads on its body, each head moving independently with its own tongue, eyes, even competing for control when they ate. Wildlife officials named him Doss and said it was a southern black racer. This kind of mutation, called bicephaly, happens when an embryo splits and then stops, basically creating an identical twin that doesn't fully separate. The snake was taken in by Florida fish and wildlife experts who said this snake could survive in human care, but that chances in nature would be slim. Snakes like this can't dodge predators as easy, they can't grab food as easy, they can't even agree with each other. One head might go left, the other wants to go right. It's just an absolute nightmare. So while a two-headed snake sounds pretty dangerous, you'd actually have an easier time dealing with two heads than one. Next up is the Dracula fish, a tiny see-through freshwater fish discovered in Myanmar in 2007. It's just 1.7 centimeters long. The males have these creepy fang-like bones protruding from their jaws. Not scales or teeth, but actual bone structures that jut out in front like vampire fangs. Scientists say billions of years ago, its ancestors lost real teeth, but this lineage reversed course and grew bone fangs again. Evolution in reverse. Pretty cool. These fangs are used by males in fights. They jab at each other in territorial squabbles. The fish is translucent, almost larva-like, and has far fewer bones than normal fish. Most of its body is cartilage, which just makes its fangs stand out even more. Scientists still don't know how or why this exact setup came about. Fangs regrowing in a species millions of years after losing them is pretty wild, and since it's only been found in one small stream, it's just kind of a freak show of nature that may never exist anywhere else. After the Chernobyl disaster, a group of wild Przewalski's horses, an endangered species, was introduced into the exclusion zone in the late 90s. These horses actually started doing pretty well in the abandoned human-free landscape, but not everything was normal. Researchers noticed that some of the horses were being born with these strange physical defects, like shortened, scruffy manes and unusually stubby tails. The deformities weren't as extreme as some other animals, but there was still a lot of concern about whether radiation exposure had messed with the horse's development. Normally, Przewalski's horses have thick, upright manes and long tails, which help protect them from insects and the elements, but these Chernobyl ones looked rougher. There's still debate about whether the radiation is the direct cause or if it's more about poor nutrition in the contaminated environment, but either way, the odd physical changes were real. Not everything in Chernobyl shrank or mutated into weird broken shapes. Some plants actually grew bigger. Certain species of moss, mushrooms, and ferns in the exclusion zone started showing signs of gigantism after the disaster. According to the Journal of Environmental Radioactivity, radiation seems to have messed with the genes that control how these plants grow. Instead of growing normally, some plants ended up with these oversized leaves or unusually thick stems. It's believed that the radiation disrupted the normal signals that tell plants when to stop growing, leading to these bizarre, almost monster-like versions. In some parts of the Red Forest, ferns grew much larger than expected, and certain mushrooms popped up freakishly big. Scientists think this is because mutations either removed natural growth limits or somehow activated dormant genetic traits. Of course, just because a plant is bigger though doesn't mean it's healthier. A lot of these oversized plants had heavy radioactive contamination. Research has shown that birds living in the most radioactive areas around Chernobyl had brains that were about 15% smaller than birds from clean areas. Researchers think that radiation exposure during development damaged cells in their brain, either killing them off or stopping them from forming properly. They found that younger birds had it worse than adults, meaning that radiation was having a serious effect during the earliest stages of life. And those birds with smaller brains, unsurprisingly, had lower survival rates. What you're looking at here is the only known photograph of a creature known as the blackbird of Chernobyl. In early April of 1986, people living around the Chernobyl nuclear power plant started reporting something strange. Witnesses described seeing this huge, dark creature, like a man, but without a head. It had massive wings and glowing red eyes. Locals started calling it the Blackbird of Chernobyl. Sightings of this thing kept piling up, right up until the morning of April 26th, when Reactor 4 exploded. That disaster unleashed a radioactive cloud that spread across parts of the Soviet Union, Europe, and North America. The area around Chernobyl was just devastated. Over 300,000 people had to evacuate, still considered the worst nuclear accident in human history. In the chaos after the explosion, though, Soviet helicopters dumped sand, lead, and other materials onto the burning reactor, trying to smother the fire. Firefighters, not realizing they were dealing with a radioactive inferno, rushed in, often without proper protection. A lot of them would die soon after the radiation poisoning, including Lieutenant Vladimir Pravik, who passed away just weeks later. But some of those firefighters who survived long enough to talk, well, they reported seeing this massive, dark, winged creature flying through the radioactive smoke above Reactor 4. After the meltdown, sightings of the Blackbird stopped completely. Some people believe that the Blackbird of Chernobyl was the same kind of entity as the Mothman, the creature seen in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, before the Silver Bridge collapsed in 1967. Both creatures had similar appearances, giant wings, red eyes, and in both cases, there were also reports of nightmares and strange, threatening phone calls before disaster struck. Another theory is that people might have actually been seeing a black stork, but the black stork only has a 6-foot wingspan, not 20. And that bird doesn't explain the terrifying dreams and phone calls that witnesses talked about. Whatever the Blackbird really was, though, it hasn't been seen again since Chernobyl. Whether it's a warning, a bad omen, or just mass hysteria, no one really knows. But if it ever shows up again, history says something very bad might not be far behind. In September of 2024, a farm in Kentucky welcomed a calf that looked like some sort of bizarre Frankenstein creation. It had 2 fully formed heads on one body. Each had its own eyes, snout, and neck, but they shared a single body and internal organs like a heart and lungs. The little calf also had other issues: a cleft palate, twisted spine, underdeveloped rectum, and weird jointed legs. Farmers said the odds of something like this happening are around 1 in 400 million. I'm not sure how they find that number, but apparently that's the case. And unfortunately, the calf didn't make it past its first day. Honestly, as bad as this might sound, I think that's a good thing. I mean, not only would it have had a poor quality of life, but you really want to see this thing walking around. Casey Tarter, one of the farmers, is also an agricultural student at Western Kentucky University. She mentioned the 2-headed calf in class, saying they decided to use it as a learning opportunity. They took detailed photos, they examined its oddly fused organs, and used the data to teach about developmental issues in mammals. In March of 2018, in Shangjing, China, a farmer found a calf with 6 legs, where there were 2 normal legs at the front and then 4 weirdly dangling limbs from its belly. The calf had trouble moving because of the extra limbs, but other than that, it was doing okay and quickly became a local attraction. People from the area started visiting the farm just to take pictures with the calf. This isn't the first time something like this happened in China. Back in 2014, another 6-legged cow was born in Shandong. This one had 2 extra legs growing out of its neck. The farmer Zhang Gongjun, who helped deliver the calf, said, "I've raised the mother for 5 years and seen her through 4 births, and I've never seen anything like this before." Once his friends shared photos of the cow online, people started showing up. Zhang said, "I get crowds of people here every day and all kinds of camera crews from TV stations." According to a 2002 study, cases like this are very rare. Only around 4 in every 100,000 cattle are born with extra limbs. In August of 2019, an angler named Debbie Geddes pulled a trout out of Lake Champlain, which had 2 mouths, one where it should be and another just below it. Her photo went viral, with people calling it the catch of a lifetime. But scientists don't actually think this was a genetic mutation. They think it could have been caused by an injury that healed oddly, creating what looks like a second mouth. One researcher from Harvard said this sort of deformity can happen when soft tissues heal in strange ways, not because of DNA changes. But that's just one theory. Nobody really knows what the deal was with this fish. Geddes released it back into the water. In October of 2021, a rare 2-headed turtle, later named Mary Kate and Ashley, hatched in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. It was a diamondback terrapin that hatched with a rare condition that caused it to have 2 heads and 6 legs, all sharing one shell. Birdseye Cape Wildlife Center posted a photo of it on Facebook, along with the caption, "This is a condition called bicephaly. It's a rare anomaly that can occur from both genetic and environmental factors that influence an embryo during development." Even though animals with this condition usually don't make it very long, the staff felt pretty hopeful. The turtles continued to be, quote, bright and active, and were eating, swimming, and gaining weight each day. Mary Kate and Ashley were discovered in a protected nesting spot. Researchers noticed that while they shared a shell, they each had their own spine and digestive system and seemed to team up to move around. In 2023, during heavy monsoon rains in India, farmers found a 5-foot albino cobra slithering through their home. Unlike some pale snakes though, this one lacked the dark pigmentation entirely, so it actually kind of glowed pale pink in the rain. Albino cobras are almost unheard of because without pigment, their skin is very sensitive to sun and their vision usually suffers. This snake was venomous, fully grown, yet somehow it managed to avoid predators and humans until it found shelter in this person's home. Wildlife rescue teams safely captured it, and the cobra was taken to a wildlife rehabilitation center, where vets said its survival was slim but improved with care. But while albino animals pop up here and there, an adult albino venomous snake is shockingly rare, apparently. In 2023, conservationists in Western Australia came across this bright blue frog, white spots, totally different from your average green tree frog. Field researchers at night heard some rustling and wandered over to see it perched near the workshop. The frog lacked the yellow pigment thanks to a genetic mutation, leaving only the blue tone behind. It's so rare that Jody Rowley, a biologist who studied tens of thousands of these frogs, said she'd never seen anything like it in her entire career. Scientists don't know if this blue frog will survive, find a mate, or have a shot at passing its color on, but regardless, it's a reminder that wild genetics can still surprise us.
In our number 4 spot today, we have Injaz. With a name that means achievement, she clearly was exactly that, because Injaz was the first camel clone ever produced. She was born back in 2009 at the Camel Reproduction Center in Dubai, and she certainly was a proud accomplishment for all of those who worked to create and raise her. In fact, the cloning of Injaz was such a success that she lived for over a decade. Her birth prompted the center to continue cloning camels, which they did about 20 to 25 times a year in the time after Injaz was born. She broke ground once again when she proved that cloned camels could in fact conceive and give birth naturally, and she did so a few times, but in the end it would be this that led to her demise. On her 4th calf, as she carried it, it grew to be too big for her to carry, which unfortunately led to dystocia late in her pregnancy. Scientists did their best to save her, but unfortunately they lost both of them. Everyone who worked to care for Injaz was rightfully extremely upset at her passing, but they clearly used her and her success as a starting point for what was to come. Now the center is turning out dozens of cloned camels every year, some going for $55,000. Not sure how I feel about that, but you know, whatever. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Bantang. Back in 2003, scientists at the Advanced Cell Technology of Worcester, Massachusetts were ecstatic when they successfully birthed a clone Bantang, which is an endangered species of cattle. To do this, they actually took frozen tissues from a male of the species that passed away many years earlier in 1980. They used these skin cells and inserted the nuclei into cow eggs, and a cow was used as a surrogate mother. They attempted this with 16 pregnancies, 2 of which came to term. With the success of one clone did come the birth of another identical twin who was born to a different cow mother, but despite being carried to term and birthed, this clone was not as expected. It was twice the normal birth weight, which quickly proved to be a very negative sign. As for the clone who was considered a success, it was hand-raised at the San Diego Wild Animal Park's Infant Isolation Unit. Unfortunately, however, due to an injury that the animal got when it was less than 7 years old, it did end up passing away, which meant that sadly the clone only lasted for about half the expected lifespan for this species of animal. In our number 2 spot today, we have the woolly mammoth. We would certainly be missing a very important animal on this list if we didn't include the woolly mammoth. These guys were of course a species of mammoth, and in fact they were one of the last in line of the mammoth species. Because of the fact that in both Alaska and Siberia there were frozen carcasses discovered, they're actually one of the most well-studied extinct creatures. Exactly why or how they were driven to extinction is widely highly debated, and another thing people like to debate is whether or not we should try and bring them back. There was a genome project completed in 2015, and since then it has been proposed the species could be revived through a few different means, but no one has yet taken the leap. Here's the thing though, there's a new company that is pretty set on de-extincting woolly mammoth, and they have a new investor. This investor is called In-Q-Tel, and they are registered as a non-profit venture capital firm that is funded by the CIA. They claim that the interest in this company is less about mammoths and more about the capability to do such crazy projects. I know this is more like a future project that might happen, but when we're talking about a huge animal like the woolly mammoth, we have to bring it up. Okay, I live in Canada. That's where the woolly mammoth would also live, I feel like. I don't know. I feel like it just has consequences for me, so I'm concerned. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Morian viviparous tree snail. This was a species of air-breathing tropical land snails that were endemic to French Polynesia, and their near extinction was caused by a chain of events that happened after something humans did. The African land snail was introduced into Tahiti in 1967 as a food source, but it quickly escaped and began to destroy crops. Biologists wanted to attempt to control the African land snail, so they decided to introduce the rosy wolf snail to the area in 1977. This went absolutely haywire, as the rosy wolf snail didn't just control the population of African land snails, but rather started to eradicate all of the snails that were native to the area, which of course includes our little friend. So this one little introduction led to them being totally extinct in the wild. These snails still exist in captivity, and there have been attempts to re-release them into the wild, maybe clone them to boost their population numbers, but unfortunately the rosy wolf snail continues to prey upon them, so at this point researchers are unsure if it will ever be possible for them to live in the wild again.
Colossal Biosciences, a Dallas biotech founded in 2021 by George Church and Ben Lamb, actually brought the dire wolf back from extinction. They took ancient DNA, one sample about 13,000 years old, the other around 72,000, identified about 20 genes that gave the ancient wolves their larger skulls, stronger bones, lighter fur, more muscular legs, and then they used CRISPR to edit those into modern gray wolf cells. They cloned those edited cells via what's called somatic cell nuclear transfer, transferring the edited cells into dog embryos, which were carried by domestic dogs. Romulus and Remus arrived in October of 2024, and Khaleesi in January of 2025. They were about as close to actual living dire wolves as they could be. They live in a 2,000-acre Texas preserve with 10-foot zoo-grade fencing, cameras, drones, vets, care staff, a storm shelter. Colossal calls it functional de-extinction because they're not true dire wolves. They're wolves with more ancient-type traits designed to fill the same role in the wild. They're not Jurassic Park level clones, but I mean, they're pretty damn close. Colossal Biosciences also gave us what they call the woolly mouse this year. Scientists compared DNA from around 121 mammoths and elephants, some fossils more than 1 million years old, to find out which genes made mammoths suited for cold. They picked 7 genes responsible for fur length, texture, color, fat storage, and then used CRISPR to edit them into regular lab mice. And the result was mice with long, wavy, golden fur and extra fat storage. In under a year, they had 38 of these woolly mice. Now, you can see where this is going. What we really want are mammoths. So why start with mice? Well, they reproduce quickly, about a 20-day pregnancy, so Colossal can test if the edits work in a live animal before trying them in larger species. The next step is Asian elephants, whose DNA matches mammoths 99.6%. They plan to edit 65 to 85 mammoth traits into elephant embryos, then implant them into pregnant elephants. Their goal is to have an actual mammoth calf by 2028. Maya was born on June 10th, 2022. She's the world's first cloned Arctic wolf. The team behind it was Syngene, a biotech company in Beijing. And they pulled it off using skin cells from a wild Arctic wolf that had died. They took that DNA and basically swapped the nucleus from the wolf cell into an egg cell that had its own DNA removed, and then they created the embryos. They implanted those embryos into beagle dogs, and it worked. Maya came out healthy. She's not de-extinct since Arctic wolves still exist in the wild, but this was a huge moment for cloning endangered animals. These wolves live in brutal, frozen environments, and their numbers are starting to shrink because of habitat loss and climate change. But Maya proves we've reached a point where cloning can realistically help endangered species from disappearing completely. The Tasmanian tiger, also called the thylacine, looked kind of like a skinny wolf with stripes on its back, but it wasn't a wolf at all. It was a marsupial, basically a mammal that carries its babies in a pouch, like a kangaroo. These things used to roam Australia, but after years of hunting and habitat loss, the last known one died at Hobart Zoo in 1936. For a long time, that was the end of the story. But now scientists are trying to bring it back. In 2017, a group in Australia managed to sequence the thylacine's DNA using bits from old museum specimens. Then they started editing the DNA of the thylacine's closest living relatives, like the Tasmanian devil, to try and build a working embryo. They're using CRISPR to swap in thylacine traits, hoping to eventually grow one either in a surrogate animal or maybe even an artificial womb. Passenger pigeons used to be everywhere in North America, millions of them flying in huge flocks. They'd roost in forests so thick that branches would break and drop tons of pigeon droppings, which is gross, but it actually helped fertilize the soil. By 1914, they were totally wiped out, thanks to overhunting and habitat loss. But now, scientists are trying to bring them back by using DNA from museum specimens and editing that into their closest living relative, the band-tailed pigeon. Because band-tailed DNA isn't identical, this would create a hybrid. Not a perfect passenger pigeon, but it would be about as close as you can get. They also tested how reintroducing these birds could affect forests. For example, researchers in Michigan simulated how a massive flock might disturb the trees, breaking branches, letting light in, changing the soil, in order to see if these birds would actually be helping anything. Right now, the team has band-tailed pigeons with CRISPR gene editing tools built in so that the edits can be passed to their offspring. And they're aiming to hatch the first passenger pigeon-like chicks around 2029, before eventually testing releases back into the wild.
After reviving dire wolves, Dallas-based Colossal Biosciences is going even bigger. They've now set their sights on two massive Ice Age animals, the short-faced bear, which stood about 14 feet tall and weighed over a ton, and Castorides, a beaver that was the size of a small person, meaning like 5 feet tall. Their plan is to basically take ancient DNA from fossils, find the genes that control things like size, metabolism, and bone structure, then plug those into modern animals. Grizzlies stand in for the bear, regular beavers for the mega beaver. They use CRISPR to do the editing, implant the embryos into surrogates, and hope the result looks and acts like the original Ice Age version. The idea is that these animals had very positive effects on the environment. They shaped rivers, moved seeds around, and cleared space for other species. Colossal's even working with indigenous groups to figure out how and where these creatures might fit back into the wild. Still, there are big unknowns. These animals disappeared over 10,000 years ago, so drop them into today's forests or waterways, and honestly, who knows what happens? They could throw things off completely at worst, or just not survive. Now, over in Australia, scientists have been trying to bring back one of the weirdest frogs I've ever heard of, and I've talked about some weird frogs on the channel before. Now, it's called the southern gastric brooding frog. It went extinct in the early 80s, but what was so strange about it? Well, it swallowed its own eggs, shut down its stomach acid, and grew the babies inside of it. Then it would give birth by burping up its young. That has to be one of the craziest birthing processes I've ever heard of. Since 2013, a team working on the Lazarus Project has been trying to bring it back using preserved tissue samples from the 70s. They took the nuclei from old cells and put them into eggs from a closely related species, the barred frog. Now, a few embryos started developing. They reached an important stage called gastrulation, where the cells finally start folding into organs. Unfortunately, none made it to full tadpoles, but even getting that far was a huge deal. It proved that it's possible frozen cells from an extinct species can still form life. Now, according to project lead Dr. Mike Archer, the science isn't being held back by DNA damage, it's the technology. Frogs only lay eggs once a year, so there's a really small window to get it right. For now, they're kind of stuck with embryos that stop stop halfway, but even that's enough to show amphibian, resurrection. It isn't completely unheard of. Now, if they can get past the early development stages, the next steps are growing live tadpoles and eventually froglets that can make their way back into streams. In April of 2025, Colossal Biosciences announced that they'd cloned 4 red wolves using so-called ghost alleys found in coyote wolf hybrids along the Gulf Coast. Red wolves are critically endangered. There's less than about 20 left in the wild and just a few hundred in captivity, and their gene pool is super shallow. What exactly are ghost allies though? Well, they're basically hidden bits of red wolf DNA that can still be found in coyotes, so Colossal extracted them, then used domestic dog surrogates to bring 4 new pups into the world. Now these pups now live on the same Texas preserve than their dire wolf clones Colossals they created. Conservationists call this a form of genetic rescue, so using a natural genetic variation to boost the health of a dying species. Critics say we still don't know how these clones will do in the wild, but everyone agrees this is a major step forward when it comes to conservation. Now, the Javan Batang is a type of wild cattle native to Southeast Asia. Their numbers have been dropping. Back in 2003, they were brought back thanks to cloning. Scientists used skin cells from a Batang that had died in 1980 and preserved in the San Diego Zoo's Forest Frozen Zoo. Now, they transferred the nucleus from that skin cell into a domestic cow egg, implanted it into a pregnant cow's, and voila! A live Batang calf was born on April 1st, 2003. A second calf followed 2 days later. Sadly, that one didn't make it. Now, the first calf did pretty well though. It lived a full 7 years before dying from a leg injury in 2010. So, while not perfect, these early days of cloning were full of failures. It wasn't a short-lived lab experiment either. This was a healthy, breathing animal that helped preserve, genetics that might have been lost forever. You could say it was sort of proof of concept.
We're kicking off the list with a big one, the king of the dinosaurs, the Tyrannosaurus rex. This was a formidable dinosaur that lived approximately 68 to 66 million years ago during the late Cretaceous period. Known for its massive size, sharp teeth, and powerful hind limbs, the T-Rex was one of the largest land predators in Earth's history. The T-Rex could grow up to 40 feet in length and stood about 15 feet tall, with a large skull filled with serrated teeth, capable of crushing bones. It was a carnivorous predator, preying on other dinosaurs and potentially scavenging for food as well. T-Rex likely had excellent vision and sense of smell, making it a skilled hunter. The general consensus amongst scientists is that resurrecting dinosaurs is highly improbable due to the ancient age of their fossils, making the recovery of viable genetic material nearly impossible. Despite these challenges though, the Adam Smith Institute is attempting to resurrect dinosaurs, including the T-Rex, by backbreeding flightless birds. Modern birds are considered descendants of dinosaurs, and the Institute aims to isolate their DNA and incorporate gene technology to recreate dinosaur traits. The Institute's vision goes beyond just resurrecting the T-Rex. They plan to extend this technology to revive more dinosaur species, expanding the controversial boundaries of de-extinction efforts. Number 9, the Velociraptor. Velociraptors were about 6 feet long, standing around 2 feet tall. They had a slender body, sharp claws on their hands, and of course that distinctive sickle-shaped claw on each foot. They were incredibly predatory. I'm going to start off with a quote by Madsen Peary, the president of the aforementioned Adam Smith Institute. Several species of dinosaur will be recreated, making their appearance on Earth for the first time in 66 million years. It will not be done a la Jurassic Park, with their DNA extracted from blood-sucking insects preserved in amber. It was always highly dubious that enough of the DNA molecule would survive in this way. Instead, dinosaurs will be recreated by backbreeding from flightless birds. Birds are modern-day dinosaurs, but they no longer look like dinosaurs. Deep within their DNA, however, will be information relating to the time when they did. And a combination of selective breeding and gene technology will be used to give them the characteristic features of dinosaurs. The jaws with teeth, the tail, the small forelimbs. Anyway, I can't imagine dinosaurs like T-Rexes and velociraptors being brought back and then released into the wild, because that would be a disaster and entirely pointless. This would definitely be a situation where they would be created purely for the spectacle of it, but that would be pretty ethically questionable as well. But now that we've established what these dinosaurs would be used for, basically being caged up for us to gawk at in weird amusement parks, let's move on to the next terrifying species on the list. Next up on the list is the Ankylosaurus. Ankylosaurus was a dinosaur that roamed the earth around 68 to 66 million years ago. It was a herbivore, but it was coated in this crazy armor. It was about the length of a car, covered in thick, bony plates all over its body. It also had a tail that ended in a heavy club type thing, like solid bone. Very powerful weapon. If a predator like Tyrannosaurus rex came too close, Ankylosaurus could swing its tail, delivering a bone-crushing blow. These were like tanks of their time. It wasn't the kind of dinosaur you'd want to mess with if you were another dinosaur. As for the idea of bringing them back, in theory, it's a possibility with advancements in genetic engineering. Scientists have explored the concept of de-extinction. This would mean extracting and manipulating ancient DNA, filling in the gaps with DNA from related modern species, and then finding a suitable surrogate for gestation. But again, all that DNA is really old, so it would probably mean something similar to the whole flightless bird thing, but I'm not a scientist and I don't know how the hell they're even going to go about that. But number 7, Gigantosaurus. Gigantosaurus was a massive theropod dinosaur that lived around 98 million years ago. Gigantosaurus earned its name, which means giant southern lizard, because of its formidable size and strength. In terms of sheer size, Gigantosaurus was one of the largest theropod dinosaurs, rivaling even Tyrannosaurus rex. It could reach lengths of up to 40 feet or more, making it a top predator in its ecosystem. It had these really sharp teeth, some measuring over 6 inches long, which were designed for, of course, tearing through flesh. It had incredible hunting abilities. It was an apex predator. Its large size combined with its powerful jaws and sharp teeth allowed it to take down even the largest dinosaurs of its time. In at number 6, we have iguanodons. These were actually herbivores, so not as dangerous as some of the stuff on this list, but they were still very formidable creatures, and I think it wouldn't take kindly to humans walking up to them if they were walking around nowadays for some reason. These lived during the early Cretaceous period. It was a large dinosaur, reaching lengths of up to 33 feet and weighing several tons. They're known for that unique thumb spike, which would have been pretty useful for defending against predators. They also had a toothless beak at the front of their mouth, used for cropping vegetation. It could walk on both its hind legs and front limbs. This allowed it to browse for vegetation efficiently. It likely fed on a variety of plants, ferns, conifers, and other vegetation that was abundant during the time. Iguanodons were also one of the first dinosaurs to be scientifically described. Its fossils were discovered in the early 19th century and played a big role in shaping our understanding of dinosaurs during that time. Alright, iguanodons are cool, but not quite as terrifying as a lot of what's on this list. So let's get back to the bad boys.
China's been cloning animals way longer than most people realize. All the way back in 1963, they successfully cloned a common carp using nuclear transfer, a huge deal at the time. Now cloning fish is trickier than mammals because of how they reproduce, but they pulled it off, and it laid the groundwork for a lot of what came after. Since then, they've cloned other species too, like Mozambique, tilapia, brown rats, and even pigs. They were mainly trying to make fish farming more efficient and get a better handle on how these animals reproduce. By cloning fish, scientists could create more consistent breeding stock, which matters when you're, feeding just millions of people, no big deal. It also opened the door for conserving endangered fish species later on, so while cloning tilapia didn't get the attention that, say, cloning a mammoth might, it was quite a big step. The Florina giant tortoise used to live in Florina Island in the Galapagos, but it was wiped out back in the 1800s, mostly thanks to whalers and pirates who used them as food and introduced invasive animals. But now scientists are bringing it back, not through cloning technology, but through smart breeding. In the early 2000s, researchers found tortoises on Isabella Island, about 50 miles away, with Florina DNA. Turns out sailors used to move tortoises between islands or just dump them off when they didn't need them anymore. These tortoises weren't 100% Florina, but some were pretty close. So scientists gathered, the ones with the strongest genetic similarities and started a breeding program on Santa Cruz Island. As of 2025, they've got about 400 baby tortoises with high percentages of this Florina DNA. Now the plan is to release them back onto the island, but first they need to get rid of rats, cats, and other invasive animals that would basically just eat the babies. This matters because these tortoises are what scientists call ecosystem engineers. They stomp around, spread seeds, clear brush, and basically keep the environment in check. If all goes well, this will be one of the most successful island rewilding projects ever. Way back in 1952, two scientists named Robert Briggs and Thomas King pulled off something huge. They cloned a frog using a method called somatic nuclear transfer. Basically, they took the nucleus, the cell's control center, from a normal frog cell and put it into an egg cell that had its own nucleus removed. That egg then started developing into a frog embryo. It wasn't a full animal clone, but it showed for the first time that you could take a mature cell, reset it, and grow a new organism from it. This was a massive breakthrough because it laid the groundwork for cloning animals later on. It proved that cloning could actually work. Plus, frogs are simpler to work with in the lab than mammals, so this gave scientists a practical way to explore cloning. And then about a decade after the first frog cloning, scientist John Gurdon came along. Instead of using embryonic cells like before, he took a fully specialized adult cell from a frog's intestine and transplanted its nucleus into an egg cell. The egg grew into a tadpole, proving that adult cells, even after they've kind of decided what, they're supposed to be doing, and so to speak, still hold all the information in their DNA to create a whole new animal. Before this, most scientists thought once a cell, specialized, it lost that ability. Now, Gurdon's experiment showed cells could be reprogrammed, which was huge for cloning. This discovery directly paved the way for cloning mammals, including Dalia the sheep, decades later. Now, without this experiment, cloning adult animals probably wouldn't have even been possible. In 2025, scientists put together a big review looking at cloning and conservation. They found that so far, 56 different species have been cloned using nuclear transfer techniques. Now, that's everything from mammals and amphibians to fish and insects, and about 90% of those cloned animals lived full, healthy lives. Plus, most of them ended up being able to have babies of their own. Love that for them. That's huge. Cloning is actually making a difference in real-world conservation. Scientists are using cloning to bring back genetic diversity in endangered species, revive species that are struggling, and we're on the brink of actually bringing back animals that went extinct a very long time ago. Cloning gives conservationists another tool in their toolbox, especially for species with tiny populations or ones that can't breed naturally anymore. The review also points out that the technology is getting more reliable and accessible, so cloning will probably play a bigger role going forward. So it's not a perfect fix, there are still some ethical dilemmas to deal with, but the results so far show that cloning can be a really positive thing for our future.
Number 5, we have the Spinosaurus. This is the main dino from Jurassic Park 3. I always thought this was a really cool one when I was a kid. These are often called the spine lizard. It was a colossal dinosaur that existed around 112 to 93 million years ago. These spines on its back could reach up to 7 feet in height. The dino itself was around 49 to 59 feet long and weighed in at 7 to 20 tons. Spinosaurus had an elongated snout filled with conical teeth suitable for catching slippery prey like fish. At first we thought it to be primarily a land-dwelling dinosaur, but more recent findings suggested it was more adapted to a semi-aquatic or even fully aquatic lifestyle. It had large clawed limbs specifically adapted for swimming. Next we have the Gigantoraptor. These things really creep me out. Imagine a turkey, like ostrich type thing, but the size of a house. It was about 16 feet long and stood around 11 feet tall, making it one of the largest feathered dinosaurs ever discovered. What makes Gigantoraptor truly interesting is its unusual combination of features. It had a beak like a bird, which hints at a diet of plants and small animals, but it couldn't fly. Scientists believe it might have used its large size as a defense mechanism against predators instead. Gigantoraptor was discovered in Mongolia, adding to the ever-expanding list of fascinating dinosaurs found in that region. When scientists unearthed its fossils, they were baffled and pretty excited all at once. It was massive, but had bird-like traits, which challenged what researchers thought they knew about dinosaurs' evolution at the time. Number 3, the Maposaurus. So this colossal predator prowled ancient landscapes of South America around 100 million years ago. Maposaurus was a member of the theropod family, closely related to the famous T-Rex. It could reach lengths of up to 33 feet. One of the most intriguing things about the Maposaurus, though, and what set it apart from the T-Rex, was its social behavior. Fossil evidence suggests that these dinosaurs might have hunted in packs. So imagine a gang of these massive predators working together, kind of like velociraptors would. This pack hunting strategy allowed them to target even the most enormous titanosaurs that roamed the region. Maposaurus was discovered in 2006 when its fossils were found in Argentina.
One group of people can naturally stay underwater far longer than almost anyone else. The Bayou of Southeast Asia live their lives on the ocean and rely heavily on deep diving. When researchers studied them, they found a hereditary mutation in a gene that enlarges their spleens by up to 50%. Larger spleens store more oxygenated red blood cells, and when they dive, that oxygen is released into their bloodstream, letting them stay underwater for minutes at a time. This mutation appears almost only in this group of people, not in neighboring populations, not in similar coastal groups. A real modern example of human adaptation shaped by isolation and lifestyle. During an extreme drought in the Amazon, people started seeing dolphins turning unusually bright pink. Pink river dolphins normally have a soft, rosy color, but in Lake Tefé during the 2023 heat wave, researchers documented dolphins with intense full-body pink coloration. The mutation appears linked to heat stress and blood vessel expansion near their skin. Younger dolphins showed the effect the strongest, suggesting a developmental trigger. Some dolphins eventually faded back to normal colors, others stayed bright. It is one of the clearest examples of environmental pressure creating rapid, visible changes in an isolated species. Most people struggle to breathe at high altitude. Tibetans thrive there because of a mutation almost no one else has, a gene called EPAS1, inherited from ancient human ancestors. It prevents blood from thickening at low oxygen levels. This lets Tibetans live at altitudes that would leave most people dizzy or sick. The mutation is incredibly common in the region, but extremely rare outside of it. It is one of the strongest known cases of inherited human adaptation, preserved because of the harsh and isolated environment of the Tibetan Plateau. In a remote region of Kazakhstan, generations of families began noticing the same disturbing pattern: birth defects, growth abnormalities, and unusually high rates of rare cancers. There was a test site that was the Soviet Union's main nuclear testing zone for decades. Between 1949 and 1989, more than 400 nuclear tests took place there. Some were underground, but many were atmospheric, sending radioactive material drifting straight into surrounding villages. Decades later, researchers discovered something alarming. People in these remote villages showed genetic mutations passed down through multiple generations. Some mutations affected bone development, others altered immune function, some increased susceptibility to diseases not normally seen in the region, and these people here never evacuated. Many did not even know that they were living in fallout, so the mutations accumulated slowly and spread within families. There's nothing supernatural about it. It is simply the long-lasting biological impact of radiation exposure combined with extreme geographic isolation. Inside Central American mangroves lives a fish that does not need a partner to reproduce. The mangrove killifish can self-fertilize, producing offspring that are nearly perfect genetic clones. rivers. It evolved this ability because the swamp pools it lives in frequently become isolated or temporarily uninhabitable. When a pool dries or becomes cut off, a single killifish can repopulate the area once conditions improve. Very few vertebrates on Earth can do this. It is one of the strangest real reproductive mutations ever documented.
A two-headed brown trout was found in a creek in southern Idaho, and it wasn't the only deformed fish in the area. Scientists found more trout with facial deformities, twisted fins, and defective eggs, and it all pointed to one thing: selenium pollution. Selenium is a metal that shows up naturally in the environment, but when it builds up from things like mining or coal burning, it becomes toxic. In this case, the pollution was traced back to operations run by J.R. Simplot, a massive agribusiness company that processes food and chemicals. They funded a study to look into the deformities, and while the report claimed that the selenium levels were safe, others strongly disagreed. Joseph Skorapa, a wildlife biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, said the study was biased and, quote, highly questionable. He pointed out that it completely skipped over the effects on birds and reptiles and seriously downplayed the deformity rates in fish. Meanwhile, in Tennessee, politicians started pushing bills to deregulate selenium altogether. See, the coal industry has a stake in this too. What's happening in one Idaho creek is just one part of a much bigger picture. There's this fish called the Clear Lake hitch that only lives in Clear Lake, California, and some of them have developed a mutation known as pug-headedness, which you can probably form a pretty clear image of in your head. They end up with steep, almost boxy foreheads, bulging eyes, and an underdeveloped upper jaw. Basically, the top half of the mouth doesn't grow right, so it ends up shorter than the bottom, making the whole face look warped. Scientists think this is thanks to pollution, mainly from pesticides and mercury that have built up in the lake over time. The hitch used to be everywhere in this area. They were a big part of the diet for indigenous tribes like the Pomo, and back in the day you could see massive runs every spring. These days, even in a good year, only a few thousand show up to spawn. Some years, barely any. Out in the middle of the Mojave Desert, there's this tiny, deep pool called Devil's Hole. It looks like just a weird blue hole in the ground surrounded by dry rocks, but it's actually a deep water-filled crack in the earth, kind of like a natural well. And inside this tiny pool lives one of the rarest fish in the world, the Devil's Hole pupfish. These fish are tiny, smaller than your pinky finger, and they've been living here for thousands of years. The water is warm, nearly 90 degrees, and has very little oxygen. The fish need that exact setup to survive. It's a very specific environment, but they've adapted perfectly. Until recently. Right now, there are only about 75 of these fish left, and scientists are worried. Their genes are a mess. Scientists have found what's called genetic load. Basically, these fish are drowning in bad DNA, and there's no way for natural selection to clean it out. This leads to what's called an extinction vortex, where the genetic problems make it even harder to survive. Back in the 70s, conservationists built backup tanks to protect the pupfish in case the wild ones died out. But at one of these tanks, some pupfish from a nearby but different species snuck in. Their babies mixed with the DNA and grew way faster and healthier, even sprouting extra fins. The hybrids exploded in number, which showed biologist Andy Martin that introducing new genes was probably the solution here. Martin thinks the Devil's Hole pupfish could be saved if they bring in a few of these cousins from a spring just a few miles away. But some conservationists hate this idea. To them, it's not really saving this specific species of fish if you're changing their DNA. Nanosilver. That sounds like an anime attack, but this is a real particle causing mutations in fish. Silver nanoparticles, tiny particles smaller than viruses, are used in over 200 consumer products because they kill bacteria on contact. Scientists are now worried these little particles might be messing with the environment and wildlife. When silver nanoparticles wash down drains, they end up in rivers and lakes. Darren Ferguson, a researcher at the University of Utah, tested these particles on zebrafish embryos in the lab and found some pretty scary mutations. Some of them became, quote, extremely distorted, almost making a number 9 or a comma instead of a linear fish, he said. The particles cause deformities in eyes, tails, and most disturbingly, their hearts. And here's something pretty scary. Zebrafish actually have organs kinda similar to ours, so this could hint at risks for people too. Scientists still don't know exactly what this means for us or the planet long term, but the Environmental Protection Agency said the same special properties that make nanoscale materials useful are also properties that may cause some nanoscale materials to pose potential risks.
Researchers deep in the Bornean rainforest found indigenous families with bright blue eyes and no European ancestry at all. Genetic testing showed the Dayak groups do not have the same blue eye mutation found in Europeans. They developed an entirely separate mutation that created the same trait through a completely different genetic path. This rare case of convergent evolution stayed preserved because the communities were extremely isolated for generations. Wolves living inside the Chernobyl exclusion zone are bigger and genetically different from wolves outside the region. Scientists found mutations related to immune response and DNA repair, which help them tolerate constant low-dose radiation. Wolf populations inside the zone are also estimated to be dramatically higher than outside it. The mutations were not engineered. They were developed naturally as the wolves adapted to an environment with no humans and persistent radiation exposure. A small coastal region in Japan saw an outbreak of severe developmental disorders caused by industrial pollution. From the 1930s to the 1960s, mercury-contaminated wastewater was dumped into Minamata Bay. When pregnant women ate contaminated fish, the mercury disrupted fetal brain development. Babies were born with a syndrome now known as congenital Minamata disease. This was a developmental mutation, not a genetic one. It changed how the brain formed in utero, caused entirely by environmental exposure in a geographically isolated community. In one of the most remote mountain regions of Siberia, researchers found sheep with unusually dense skull bones. The isolated snow sheep of the Putorana Plateau showed mutations affecting bone development. Their skulls and horn bases were noticeably thicker than normal, likely an adaptation to harsh cold and heavy predation pressure. Because the herd was cut off from other populations, the mutation strengthened over time instead of being diluted. In one remote region of South America, an entire population developed a mutation that allows them to survive something that should be deadly. In parts of northern Argentina and the Atacama region, local drinking water naturally contains high levels of arsenic, some of the highest on Earth. But instead of widespread poisoning, researchers discovered something unexpected. People in this isolated area carry a rare mutation in the gene AS3MT, which dramatically increases the body's ability to detoxify arsenic. For most humans, arsenic builds up in the body and causes organ damage. For this population, the toxin is processed and expelled far more efficiently. The mutation is thought to have developed over thousands of years of exposure to the contaminated water supply. What makes it truly strange is how localized it is. Populations just a few hundred miles away do not have this protection. It is one of the strongest real examples of humans evolving resistance to a natural poison.
In California's Kesterson Reservoir, a big environmental problem popped up because of selenium pollution. Selenium is a naturally occurring element, but when it builds up too much, it becomes toxic. In Kesterson, the water got contaminated with high selenium levels, mainly from irrigation runoff. The fish there, especially embryos, started coming out with serious deformities. Some had messed up eyes or were just missing them completely. There were deformities in their fins, the brain. Scientists call this cluster of problems Kesterson syndrome. And it's not limited to fish because the birds eating them also suffered. Birds have been found with deformed beaks, legs, wings. In Oneida Lake, New York, walleye fish started appearing with tumors. This comes from exposure to chlorinated wastewater effluent. That's water discharged from treatment plants containing chlorine byproducts. So these chemicals don't break down easily and can build up in the lake. These tumors are obviously a sign that pollution in the lakes has carcinogenic effects, meaning it can cause cancer. Walleye are especially important too because they're popular for fishing, so this is worrying not only scientists, but fishermen and the communities who depend on the lake. Back in the 70s, a coal-fired power plant in North Carolina started dumping wastewater full of selenium into Bellows Lake. Over time, it completely wrecked the fish population. By the early 2000s, the number of fish species in the lake dropped from 24 down to just 6. Most of the fish couldn't reproduce anymore. One study found that 19 of the original 20 species couldn't produce any surviving offspring. Only smaller fish that ate plankton, like mosquito fish, managed to stick around. They weren't affected as badly by the selenium buildup. Eventually, the plant stopped dumping the waste into the lake in 1986. Levels of selenium in the water dropped way down, and they even restocked the lake with sport fish like bass and bluegill. But even 10 years later, the fish were still having trouble reproducing. That's because selenium sinks to the lake bed and slowly leaks back into the food chain, especially if storms stir up the sediment. To make things even worse, some illegally introduced Alabama bass in 2011. They started outcompeting the native bass, especially largemouth. Now state officials are trying to get rid of them by removing catch limits, but the damage is already being done. In the Great Lakes, especially Lake Ontario and Lake Michigan, scientists have seen lake trout hatching with strange deformities. They found fish with weird faces, swollen yolk sacs, which are the little sacs attached to fish embryos that hold the nutrients they need to grow, and they have bloated areas around the heart, symptoms known as blue sac disease. It's caused by exposure to dioxins and toxic chemicals that build up in the water over years from things like industrial waste and pesticides. These toxins settle in the sediment but work their way up the food chain. Fish at the top, like lake trout, get hit hardest because they eat smaller, contaminated fish. The damage mostly shows up in the embryos, so it's affecting reproduction more than anything else. Many of the baby fish just don't survive. These deformities were first spotted decades ago. They're still showing up in areas where dioxin levels are high. Even though regulations have cut down on the amount of dioxins going into the lakes, the old contamination is still there. Now, we've talked about all the bad stuff going on with fish, but what about some interesting adaptations? Well, Atlantic tomcod in the Hudson River developed a mutation that lets them survive in waters full of toxins. For decades, the river was basically a chemical dumping ground. Chemicals that usually kill or will seriously harm fish, but scientists have noticed that tomcod have developed a genetic mutation that changed how they process pollutants. Normally, these chemicals get into a fish's cells and start causing damage, but this mutation messes with the pathway the pollutants usually use. Instead, the fish store the toxins in their fat, basically locking them away where they can't cause a whole lot of harm. This trait didn't show up everywhere. It's specific to tomcod that live in polluted water. The downside, though, is that these fish are now heavily specialized to survive in dirty, polluted water. If the environment changes again, even if it's for the better, they might not adapt fast enough. And they're still concerned about predators eating them and taking in those same toxins up the food chain, including people who eat the fish. Killfish are tiny, colorful fish found along the East Coast, often in places no other fish would want to be, like New Jersey's Newark Bay or Virginia's Elizabeth River, where there's a lot of toxic waste. These areas are loaded with dioxins and heavy metals, but somehow killfish are doing pretty well, all things considered. Turns out they've evolved an insane resistance, up to 8,000 times more than normal. Researchers collected hundreds of killfish from different polluted sites and sequenced their genomes. And what they found was that each population had developed similar mutations in the same genes that basically turned off the normal response to these toxins. This kind of resistance is only possible because killfish have super high genetic diversity. For other species that don't have that kind of variation, adapting like this isn't really an option. Again though, there's still food for birds and bigger fish, so there's still a lot of worry as to how all that stored up pollution could affect the rest of the food chain.